Well, good morning, everybody. That's about how my Friday is going. Wanted to just kind of check in with, oh, here we go. This will work. Okay, perfect. All right. Microsoft Teams would like to control. Okay, can you see that screen? It says, how are we showing up today?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
perfect.
Just real quick, procedurally, I don't know if we need to call this meeting to order first.
I believe we do,
We
Mayor.
do. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. So we will start off that before we get into the good discussion here. So it is Friday, February 4th of our City Council budget retreat, calling to order. Notice to the public that we may vote to go into executive session for legal advice on any of the agendized items. Roll call, please.
Mayor Deasy.
Here.
Vice Mayor Daggett.
Here.
Councilmember Aslan.
Good morning, everyone. Here.
Councilmember McCarthy.
Here.
Councilmember Salas.
Present.
Councilmember Shimoni.
Good morning, everybody. Here.
Councilmember Sweet.
Here.
All right, thank you. And with that, let's have Vice Mayor, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
I would be honored to do so. Thank you. Stand as you are able. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. And Councilmember Salas, our mission statement, please.
The mission of the City of Flagstaff is to protect and enhance the quality of life for all.
Thank you. And how about Councilmember Shimoni for the land acknowledgement?
Thank you, Mayor. It'd be my honor. The Flagstaff City Council humbly acknowledges the ancestral lands of this area's indigenous nations and original stewards. These lands, still inhabited by native descendants, border mountains sacred to indigenous peoples. We honor them, their legacies, their traditions, and their continued contributions. We celebrate their past, present, and future generations who will forever know this place as home.
Thank you, Councilmember Shimoni. And that brings us to agenda item 4, our City Council fiscal year 2022-2023 budget retreat. I'll hand it off here to Nicole, or if City Manager wanted to pipe in first, the floor is for either of you.
Well, thank you. I'll just start by welcoming everybody and giving you notice here that I'm operating on my mobile phone because I'm having a hard time with Outlook this morning. That said, I can hear you and I can see you, and it's all good, but I probably, I'll put my camera on just so you can see that I'm here and I'm wearing a tie. And with that, I will exit from the camera, turn it over to Nicole. Good morning, Nicole, and thank you for being with us again. We look forward to today's discussion.
Good morning, Greg. All right, tie proven. We're appreciative of that. Well, I was really excited to get started, so thanks for reining me in a little bit there in case anybody's wondering how Friday's going over here for Team Lance. Oh, nice, Chief. Okay, so before we begin, I want to do just a really brief check-in with council because it is Friday morning. We had a long day yesterday. It's the end of the week. Just kind of a lot going on. Just a little bit, just real quick, how are we showing up today? So I love these comparisons. How I think I look with smoky eyes, but like how I actually look. Then we have things like, how I think I look after a tough day at work, how maybe I actually look instead. And the most important one, how I think I handle stress, and then how I actually handle stress. So again, when we're operating in challenging times, which everybody is getting like super tired of that phrase, but times that require us to behave differently, right? We show up and the audio's not working. Stacy's running it off of 2 machines in the room and trying to do it. And we've got to log back in and log back out. So Vice Mayor, glad that we've got you and you can hear us now. it all creates extra stress. So to create just a little bit of context for us today, I want us to do just a really quick check-in and just council member by council member, and I'll call you out. CJ, point for the actuarial analysis. Look at that custom slide. I like it. I like it. Okay. We'll just do a really quick check-in. And Vice Mayor, actually, if you're okay, I'd love to start with you. And the scientific way that we check in is which Muppet best represents how you are feeling today and why. So for example, if I did it, I would say, I am definitely Beaker, have been since 4:40 when my 3-year-old decided it was a great time to wake up instead of sleeping in until the normal time like usual. And here we are. So Vice Mayor.
All right, I'm going to say that this morning I am Kermit because I am ready to get to work, and yet I'm also ready to have a little fun.
All right. Okay. Let's go, Councilmember Aslan, you're next. Oh.
Nicole, he just joined, so it might take him a moment.
Okay. Councilmember McCarthy, how about you?
Sorry, I had to unmute. I feel like the Cookie Monster.
Okay. All right. Based on breakfast?
Well, actually, my wife, at this very moment, is making homemade cookies. Before I got online here, I was helping her. So I don't see the Cookie Monster up there, but that's what I feel like today.
Yeah, it's not up there.
Okay.
But I feel like I want to be the Cookie Monster.
You know what, Councilmember? You can do that. Way to take.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. You're right.
Way to take control of your own destiny. All right. Oh my goodness. Councilmember Salas.
Well, Kermit resonates with me because I've always loved to sing and I love the Rainbow Connection. Someday we'll find it, the Rainbow Connection, the lovers, the dreamers, and me.
All right.
That just made my day.
Wow. Okay. Man, you guys are like next leveling this check-in. Mayor, which one are you today? Which Muppet would best represent how you're doing and why?
Oh, well, sticking to the 6 here, I started thinking about Sesame Street references, but yeah, I'm gonna go with Fozzie Bear. Sleep deprivation either turns me into Statler and Waldorf or Fozzie Bear. And today it's a little goofy in the house with lots of little ones who actually are not sleep deprived. So I'll go with that.
All right. Man, you guys are taking this serious. I like it. Councilmember Sweet, which Muppet and why?
Good morning, everyone. I am going to go with Miss Piggy. I have my necklace on like she does in the picture. I got up early, I got myself ready, got the kids off to school. She's smiling, I'm smiling. So I think it's going to be a great day, and thank you, Miss Piggy.
All right, Councilmember Shimoni, and then Councilmember Aslan will have you wrap us up.
Gosh. Well, Councilmember Sweet stole mine. But I don't know. I guess animal most resonates with me for sure, being just wild and crazy. Definitely feeling good this morning, feeling good after yesterday's meeting. Definitely tired at the moment, but I'll wake up with time. But yeah, really excited about today's conversation and proud of the dialogue that we had yesterday. Thank you.
All right, Councilmember Aslan.
Hi-ho, everybody. Kermit the Frog here. Special news flash. I always have been and always shall be Kermit the Frog.
Wow. Okay. This has been incredibly informative. Thank you. And if anybody's wondering, like, what the heck are we doing? Why are we wasting time on anything like this? The reason actually that we do it is to, like I said, get kind of a handle on where everybody's at, but also remember we are humans coming in with human things or Kermit the Frog types of things. And so when we come into sessions like this, remember from previous meetings, when we show up on screen and there's all the faces right in front of us and they're a couple feet away, that can stimulate some of our stress response, like Jack Nicholson through the door. So doing just a little bit of a check-in is going to really get you kind of into, okay, here's where everybody's at, but also lighten the mood and ease it up a little bit. So yeah, I'm pretty sure we have we weren't looking for a winner of the check-in, but I'm pretty sure we did right at the end. So, okay. So we are going to begin by wrapping up the housing conversation from yesterday. So I think we've got Sarah, hopefully is on, and Tita. Look at that. Sarah said your name and you appear. This is amazing. All right. So we've got Sarah kind of to take us back into that conversation, and then we'll continue with our resource allocations and priorities conversations. All right, Sarah, over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I don't have slides on my screen. Are they coming? Oh, thank you, Mr. Tatter. I'm not a council member, but I want to relate the Fozzie Bear piece of the moving right along in the car with Kermit, because I feel like that's what we're doing this morning, and we're just going to move right along. So, good morning, Mayor and Council. I'm Sarah Darden, the Housing Director. It is a privilege to be with you this morning, and I'm kind of glad I got bumped yesterday, because that was fun. So, I'm going to try to keep right within my time frame, and we will keep things moving. I've been asked to talk about a couple of things this morning. One is to review the Housing Commission bond recommendations, which are going to look really familiar to you, with a touch of history about that, and then our housing resource allocation needs. And within here, tying back to yesterday, we actually have a win story that is going to line up with one of the budget allocation needs. I couldn't have planned it if I tried. So if we can move to the next slide, please. We'll start with a history of our lessons learned. So there was a housing bond item in 2018. It was called Proposition 422, and it did not pass by fewer than 3% of the votes. It is 747 votes. That's the number that lives in my head. And the Housing Commission explored this and found that these four things were the main things that they felt impacted 422 not being successful. I'm sure there are a number of others, but these were the main four the commission landed on. And that was number one, council direction to place it on the ballot was later than typical timing for similar items. So that limited our time frame. It put everyone else on a different schedule. They were pretty deep into this when housing was tossed on the bus, which we were grateful to be there, but we were using a different consultant. We were using different time frames, and we were pretty crunched. There was divided council support to place it on the ballot. It was a 4-3 decision, and that's something we heard during our Rubber Chicken Traveling Roadshow as we traveled around the community and spoke with people about the ballot. The citizens felt the proposition was vague and lacked accountability. I can't really disagree with that. We crafted it very, very quickly. And we also found many citizens misunderstood the tax implications of the bond. And on this one, I said we throughout there. I acknowledge I am not a member of the Housing Commission, but I am the one that did the Traveling Roadshow. And so there, I encountered these questions repeatedly throughout that process, kind of regardless of which group we were talking to. So with these things in mind, that's history. Let's talk about what's happened in the past 4 years. Next slide, please, Mr. Tatter. So what has changed in the last 4 years? Well, it's been 4 years. It hasn't been 2, it's been 4. Work started on recommendations this time in 2019, and the framework for recommendations was in place early. We were prepared in 2022, and those recommendations were refreshed in 2021. if we look in the what it feels like forever back machine, the bond recommendations from the Housing Commission were presented to Council on March 3rd, 2020. I believe it was a week and a half later, everything shut down. So those were refreshed in 2021 at Council's request. In the last 4 years, Council established a Housing Commission and also declared a housing emergency. And City Council has expressed support for a housing bond measure multiple times in the last several years. Also, what's changed is oversight and accountability. There were a lot of folks that felt that, well, it specified, the last bond measure specified that there would be oversight and that there would be a broad membership. It wasn't specific. And so the ordinance creating the Housing Commission specifically mentions responsibility of oversight for bond funds, of course, with council being the absolute backstop to that. So it's really council's responsibility, but there'll be a multidisciplinary housing commission that is also overseeing those bond funds should this make it to the ballot and voters adopt it. One of the criticisms was that it lacks specificity in programs, activities, and predicted outcomes. So the Housing Commission created very specific bond recommendations and also some projected outcomes. Additional in this category, the 10-year housing plan. That was one of the other things that had come up is like, we don't have a plan. Well, we do, but we don't. We have a lot of them, but now we have one. That the 10-year housing plan is scheduled for approval by City Council February 15th. It was approved unanimously by the Housing Commission a week ago yesterday. The other dynamic that has changed, that is not something that we worked on as staff, like the previous ones, is that we're seeing a growing community understanding and interest of the affordable housing challenges in our community. I have people ask me different kinds of questions now, rather than why is housing so expensive, which is what the questions are I used to get asked. I'm being asked more questions about what could we be doing differently. People seem to be understanding the lasagna that is affordable housing challenges. So with that in mind, the housing, keep going, Rick, thank you. Housing Commission developed bond recommendations in 19, revisited in 21, based on a council request. What you're about to see is in 3 categories: emergency housing, rental housing, and homeownership. And the commission really focused on these along the lines of the housing continuum, which is why I have it on the slide, is that we know that it is a continuum and people can move up and down those stair steps, but we really wanted to capture the biggest pieces of it where we encounter challenges all the way along. So emergency will be represented as EH, rental housing as RH, and homeownership as OWN. I'll take the next slide, please, Rick. In our emergency housing recommendations is a total ask for $17 million. And of course, these are emergency housing, partner with local service providers in support of existing development of new and/or expansion of housing assistance programs focused on emergency housing, coupled with eviction prevention and diversion programs so that we can keep people, if at all possible, from becoming homeless within our community. The commission felt it was important to note that all the funds that we're going to be talking about would be utilized over a long time period. It's not an $11 million influx on day one, but rather as local service providers come up with places where they need support or new programs, or we can fill a gap with those funds would be utilized over a long period of time. We don't see a lot of revolving fund capability within this. You'll see in a minute with some of the others, which you have seen by and large all of these, is that we do have some revolving fund capacity, meaning that our results are not only within the first expenditure of that dollar, but we would see results as that dollar comes back to us and is spent again. We don't see a lot of room for that here. It's possible, depending on the structure of other funding sources we may layer with, but this is the one area where it's really difficult to create revolving funds in this area. Our next one is focused on rental housing. And Mr. Tatter. Tatter's drinking coffee. Thank you, Rick. Our rental housing recommendations for a total of 16 million here. Redevelopment of housing owned and managed by the city. This is some money to assist with the RAD process I keep talking about, that horrible acronym, the redevelopment. Wow. It's a demonstration project. Rental assistance demonstration project. Thank you for your patience with my Friday brain. We put 250 units minimum in here. I believe that it will far exceed that, but we don't have anything concrete at this point, although we are in the process of negotiating a pre-development agreement with our selected respondent to the RSOQ. So we hope to have that in front of council in April, and this project is moving. Thank you, Chief. A big one is to incentivize private sector affordable rental development through the creation of a revolving loan fund. And this is a spot where we can see money cycle out and back in and out and back in, similar to what we do with some of our home buyer assistance and our old housing rehab loans, where we fund those over and over and over for different households as they're paid off. So the next one would be acquisition of property in partnership with private developers to adaptively reuse available property for the creation of affordable housing. This one also has the potential to revolve. And what you'll notice in the bulk of these recommendations is that it's all about partnership, and it's all about working with the community in order to accomplish our community goals of making sure people that want to live in Flagstaff have a realistic opportunity to do so. Our next category is ownership. And in ownership, we see workforce housing ownership. 17 million is the total ask in this area. Our homebuyer purchase assistance loan program. This would be similar to what we've done in the past with city general funds, being able to target households above that magical 80% AMI number where we're limited with all other governmental funding. And so this would just be at a much greater scale. Revolving fund capacity, absolutely. We're already doing it. We know that it works. Development and or acquisition assistance for land or units to create affordable homeownership opportunities. Again, absolutely revolving capacity within this. And then our owner-occupied health and safety housing rehabilitation loan program. This is a program that works with low-income homeowners. Quite often we find our clients in this program are elderly, living on a fixed income, and sometimes even own their home free and clear, but couldn't afford that extra payment to go after a home improvement loan. And so this would be a zero interest loan, or at least it has been in the past, to help those households address health and safety issues. This isn't like I want new carpet and new cabinets. This is I need a new roof. My heater gave out. Our plumbing is falling apart. Our home is so old. Those are the types of things that we have been able to address in the past with this program. And again, it has a revolving capacity. Those are zero interest loans that are not paid back until the home is no longer owner occupied, is sold or refinanced for cash out. And so the commission felt strongly that that was something our community could invest in. On the next slide, what we have, I hope it all fit. It did. Thank you. So these are all of the, on the left-hand side, are all of the proposed housing bond projects I just went over. The main ask is $50 million. That's recommendation 1. However, the Housing Commission, knowing our conversation we had with council before, and knowing that there are several other items on the table for consideration, developed recommendations for $40 and $30 million as well. What you'll notice is nothing went away. The dollar amounts decreased in certain categories, and that's a pretty critical message, is that this package was created to work together, was created to work along multiple areas of the housing continuum in order to create a comprehensive package. So nothing's eliminated, the dollar amounts are less on some. And with that, Mr. Chatter, I'll take a drink of water. The next thing that I was asked to talk about is what our resource needs are in housing for the upcoming year. What we did with these is we took the 10-year plan, which is about to be adopted, yay, and we looked at the immediate and short-term strategies and goals, went through them, one of the biggest ones, and we separated this into resource needs tied to the plan and potential bond measures. And the next slide, don't go yet, Mr. Downer, is resource needs just tied to the plan. So create 3 out of our, if you'll remember, create, connect, preserve, protect. Those are our categories in the 10-year plan, is to create a dedicated funding source for affordable housing in Flagstaff, with Create 3.1 being to present a 2022 bond measure to council and the community for consideration for additional funding to be leveraged with other items. This is already underway. I just presented recommendations to you. That's what the bond committee will be seeing, I believe, next Thursday and the Thursday after. And then there are 2 other create strategies underneath here that can be addressed through the bond package as presented. Next, and when we move to the next slide, what we will see is resource needs tied to plan implementation in the immediate and short-term category. Create 5 was to explore regulatory efficiencies and cost-saving practices. I'm not one to usually read slides to you, but there was so much work that went into this wording. So we'll read the next one. Is to hire an independent consultant to review city codes, processes, and fees to determine whether modifications, reductions, or eliminations would facilitate cost-saving housing development strategies. And then there's associated ones underneath that we can tie into this. That's a big task, is to review city codes. It doesn't say just one, it says city codes, processes, and fees. This is a result of feedback both from council, from our citizens working group, from the citizens survey that we put out, and from after we had all of this input, we had the plan, Leah Bloom, who's amazing and responsible for this being where it is. She's done phenomenal work. Put out to help us prioritize these things. What would you like to see tackled first? This is what the community said they would like to see tackled first. And so I understand that it is a big ask. However, it's an ask that incorporates many things, including some work that sustainability desires to do within codes, etc. It would include multiple departments and sections within the city structure, because we all touch these codes and processes and fees. Another piece I do want to point out here is Create 1.2 has to do with updating the affordable housing incentive policy. As I'm sure you know, Dan Seimer departed our organization in late December, and he's our code person. He was the one writing the code. The community outreach is done. We've had a ton of staff meetings talking about how we do different procedures, what makes sense incentive-wise or not. There's a small quantity of work left to do on our side, and then there's code writing. With his departure, and we know what a challenge hiring is, we could build this into this process in order to be able to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, or at least give 2 birds the possibility to land on 1 branch, rather than offing tiny little birds early in the morning. I do want to call your attention down to the bottom one as well, which is evaluate and amend the current ADU zoning code standards with the goal of increasing supply. This couples with things sustainability is doing with ADUs, which talks about how things are, we can create greater density, we can create the ADU code, etc. All of these things tie together throughout the city, not just housing. I'd be remiss if I left it that way. We'd be lost without partnerships. So if I could go to the next slide, please. These are resource needs tied to plan implementation that are labeled within the immediate and short-term category. Connect 1.2 is create a housing navigator or advocate position to assist both landlords and housing challenged populations in securing and maintaining housing. So council, we went to a budget team in July of last year and asked for a position such as this. We had some one-time funding come to us for HUD for the emergency housing voucher program that came out of the CARES Act. And we hired somebody with one-time funding, and she's phenomenal. And here's where our win story comes in. Today, Yvette is helping a woman who has been homeless in our community, living in a tent, to move into an apartment. Now, why this navigator is so important is usually with a housing voucher, we hand them a housing voucher and say, so a regular Section 8 voucher, we'd say, here's your voucher. Good luck in finding housing. Let us know when you have found a place to live. We know that those experiencing homelessness in our community or dealing with abusive situations or mental health situations, et cetera, don't always have the capacity to identify that rental unit and take care of all the steps and paperwork, et cetera, necessary in order to get into a stable housing situation. This is what Yvette is doing today, is moving this woman into an apartment. We found one, which is amazing in this rental market. The apartment complex agreed to expedite some of their application procedures. Yvette has handheld this woman through multiple steps, and last night she slept in a tent, and tonight she's not going to sleep in a tent. And that's what this position is doing for us within housing. So there's our associated resource need with that one. I had to work not to cry in that one because this is why we do the work we do. Protect 2.4 relates to implementing a public outreach campaign to educate the community about the role affordable housing plays in a thriving, growing, economically sound community. This is something we've been talking about. It's something that is now in the plan. We got a small allocation for funding for this within the last year, but we really want to hit this hard along the lines of helping people understand what we're doing and why we can't do it alone and why it is our community's issue and not the city's issue. So the last request in this area is a first-year plan implementation. There are a number of things in the plan that are within that immediate and short term and really call for staff time. And we're not quite sure what that's going to look like. Some of them will need to have some public involvement processes. And as we looked at it and we thought, we don't have a whole heck of a lot of money here, we could really need a small pot of money that we could access to be able to send out mailers, to be able to make sure that we're providing what needs to be in what we need to do in order to implement those strategies that are really dedicated to staff time, but could use some extra help along the way. On our next slide, I'm going into resource needs for our ongoing programs. This is status quo. The bond is what you asked us for. You asked us for big, audacious thinking. That's what the bond does. These requests here, because bond election isn't until November and we're not quite sure where that's going, this is the keep us going piece. This is items we ask for on an ongoing basis every year, which is the Community Home Buyer Assistance Program. And these are the dollars that provide households above that 80% AMI mark where federal and state funds stop, and this one goes higher to acknowledge that those needs in our community stretch into our workforce. They don't stop at that low income mark here in Flagstaff. Also our organization-wide employer assisted housing program, and then some additional funding for developer incentives. On the next slide, it was suggested that I mention what we have ongoing funding for and what we don't. So, Council, we have ongoing funding for CDBG and our Housing Authority programs. Under budget asks for the Housing Authority programs, there are multiple. However, they're all funded within the federal funds that we receive from the federal government. So, not a whole lot there. All of our other housing programs, our staffing, etc., with the exception of CDBG and our Housing Authority, comes from general fund one-time annual request. Staffing is ongoing. Sorry, let me fix that before the budget team shoots me. The staffing is ongoing. The other things that we do programmatically have come from general fund one-time annual requests. So as we review what's underway, yes, right now we have the chat program underway. They're due to run out of money before July 1, and we don't have ongoing funding for that. So I think that's the end of housing. I'm checking. Yes, I think that's the end of what I turned in. Whoop, whoop. Capital improvements is next. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Mayor Deasy.
Well, thank you. I do see Vice Mayor had a question, I think, before I raised my hand, so I want to respectfully have,
Hey, look at that. Vice Mayor, we'll go to you first. I saw him pop up at the same time, so.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Nicole. Thank you, Sarah Dar, for this great presentation. I have a couple of questions. Are you able to go back to the bond? Yes, you or whoever is controlling the slides.
It's the magical Rick Tatter.
Okay, where's the eviction prevention?
It's
okay.
EH2.
Can you walk us through, because I know a bit of this is already going on in the community. Can you walk us through how this boosts those efforts? And then what happens if, we've given the $3,000 per household? What happens? What else is available to that household if they need additional assistance?
Thank you, Vice Mayor, for the question. A point that I failed to make throughout this, and maybe I did make it, local money equals local rules. Right now, what's being utilized for eviction prevention is federal and or state funding. And so that has some caps that we find in our communities sometimes are too low to help households that are working households. They're working every day, but they may not be in benefited positions where, one bout of COVID or the flu or they break an arm impacts the income to that household. So we would be able to create the rules. You would be able to create the rules around this. And it would augment what we're doing, but be able to be targeted specifically within our community. We don't administer the bulk of what the programs. That's not news to council. You know what we do. We contract out. Our partner on eviction prevention is Coconino County Community Services. That's not their name anymore. Coconino County Health and Social Services.
Human Services, isn't it?
Human Services. I know Kim Musselman will forgive me. And so we partner with them for them to deliver eviction prevention now. I don't know why we would need to change that. They offer help. It's not just, okay, we're going to pay this on your behalf, but rather let's sit down and look at what got you into this situation. Let's talk about keeping you sustained in housing. Typically, eviction prevention funds can only be accessed one time per year. Let's look at your budget. Let's look at doing some basic financial education throughout that process so that the household doesn't necessarily find themselves in the same position again. There are some other entities in our community that do provide eviction prevention, and we could broaden our partnerships to include them as well. I feel like there were two parts to your question and I only answered one.
Well, you did answer it. So this would increase the resources available to help families that are in this situation, but also take advantage of ongoing programs to help those families should they find themselves in that position again. I anticipate questions from the public saying, well, if it's one time $3,000, what happens to that family, if their income hasn't changed at all? And so what happens to them after they get $3,000?
What we find most often is that, one, they don't need the entire amount. Sometimes they have 2/3 or 3/4 of their rent payment. They're just missing enough to get there. And that's where that financial education and examining the circumstance that got that family into that situation, that's exactly where that comes in. And that's a big, big piece that goes along with eviction prevention and diversion, along with the knowledge that it's way more expensive to pull someone out of homelessness than it is to prevent them from getting into it. So many people that we serve in partnership with the county with this program, it's really because of one unanticipated life situation, and they are living that close to the edge that unpredictable situation took the money for that month. We often do not see folks coming back month after month, especially because you can only receive it once per year. And rarely are we asked to cover an entire rental payment. Typically, it's, I have this much, I'm missing this much. So pre-COVID, eviction prevention ran out of money first of the month. Like, as the moment that month's allocation of money was available, it was gone. COVID has changed that somewhat, where right now the county actually still does have funding for eviction prevention. That's one-time money we anticipate running out. The eviction moratorium is over, and we're not seeing new funds flowing from the federal government in this direction any longer.
Thank you. I have another question, if I may, Nicole. So this housing navigator position, can you describe, help us understand how this position works with the community and the front door program, and how it can, I guess, amplify the efforts of helping someone navigate from experiencing homelessness into being housed?
Absolutely. So the emergency housing voucher program that we are newly implementing, came out of CARES money, specifies that instead of pulling people off of the waiting list, we coordinate with a continuum of care and only take referrals from front door. And so all of the folks that she is working to house with our 29 emergency housing vouchers are referrals directly from front door. She attends case conferencing. This is really the first time we as a housing authority have been able to plug in with case conferencing, because our other programs, our public housing and our VASH and our
VASH
Section 8 in general, mainstream, all of those, we have to function off of waiting lists. And VASH comes to us from VA, but there isn't a way to house someone in our programs in an emergency until these emergency housing vouchers. And so it's finally a way where we can play in coordinated entry into the system. It's been really great. Yvette has built relationships with our agencies. For the woman today moving into the apartment, We are working with, we've been working with Flagstaff Shelter Services. She works with St. Vincent de Paul, has beds that we purchase. They purchase bulk. We have some federal funding that we're able to do that. So she'll move into an apartment with a bed. That's really the only thing. But we also work with Catholic Charities. I already mentioned Flagstaff Shelter Services, and with our local landlords. So this is the spot where we're actually finally able to play as a partner within some of our already established local systems, because the federal regulations were prohibitive previously.
Okay, so with local dollars, there is there's more that we would be able to do, and additional people we'd be able to serve, because the funding is coming from a different source. And so this position, you're telling us that this, excuse me, that this position is filling a needed gap in the community.
This position is filling a needed gap in our community. For months, I had on my to-do list, and I would move it from 1 week's list to the next week's list, find money for a navigator. And then the EHV funding fell out of the sky, and I sound emotional today. I almost cried because there it was. But that funding is one time. And so what we have found with the Housing Navigator, I've long wanted one, because we have a number of clients in our other programs as well that suffer with mental health challenges, that suffer with an inability to go adequately find a housing unit for themselves within our voucher programs, et cetera. And those clients take a lot of our housing specialist time, and our housing specialists don't have social work backgrounds. They have housing backgrounds, and it's a different skill set to work with someone. We have a client, Greg and Dan know exactly what I'm talking about, who is suffering from such mental health delusions. We're working with the guidance center. We're working in every way we can to keep her successfully housed. And she is still taking hours and hours a week of time from staff. And not taking from, we continue to invest in her, but we are investing those hours in one client instead of being able to spread. Yvette's introduction onto that scene has really, really helped us bring in the guidance center and potentially adult protective services, and so that we can focus on housing this household, not trying to figure out what else can we be doing that isn't really our spot. So yes, and this request would give the position greater freedom to work better within the community as well. Not work better, work within the community. Right now, we have to tie every single hour she works to a program, which means if somebody calls with something that's a little bit outside the scope of what we can do, we can fudge it for a little bit. I see. And get it in there, but there are times where we've had to say no because if she's funded with federal funds and it's really strict on what we can do with her.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor, I don't want to cut it short inordinately, but I do want to make sure you got your question answered. And we have Mayor DC and Councilmember Shimoni. I see you on video as well in the queue.
I will work on shorter answers.
I did. Thank you. And thank you, Sarah.
Yeah, and Sarah, not again the passion, and I think this is part of what's a little unique to Flagstaff, but not unique in local government, is that desire to really serve the community and do it well, and that's what we're really seeing clearly here. And I love that we're able to celebrate this. So yeah, let it fly, let it fly. Mayor, did you still have a question? And then
I had a few, so I'm going to try to be concise, but I have a lot on this front. So I'll start actually near the end of the presentation. But the developer assistance dollars, how would that be used specifically?
Are you speaking directly incentives?
To the 100,000 on the general fund dollar request.
Aha. Thank you. On the general fund side. So right now we do have an incentive policy for affordable housing. We use these dollars every year. Through that incentive policy, we have the ability to pay for fees, like impact fees, on behalf of folks providing affordable housing. Most often we're seeing these dollars used via Habitat for Humanity, Housing Solutions of Northern Arizona, and also some for-profit developers that are including affordable housing within their developments. The incentive policy, of course, is being rewritten. We keep talking about it. We're going to get there, I promise you. But the bottom line, what we've heard from the community on when Jen Michelson and Dan Seimer did the traveling roadshow about what would be most effective incentive for you, what we've really heard is the financial side. The regulatory side's nice, and yes, they can take advantage of the resource protection and the landscaping reduction requirements, et cetera. But when it really comes down to it, it's the financial piece. $100,000 isn't very much money in the scheme of incentives for development. One large developer could eat our entire balance, and I'm going to ask Justina Costa to type in the balance in the comments over here. Right now we're sitting on about 300,000. The bulk of that is earmarked for things coming forward already. So adding the 100,000 keeps us moving at our status quo spot. We used to receive $100,000 a year pre-2008 recession. We would receive a regular allocation to this account. We haven't been receiving that, and that was okay for a while because development took a nosedive. We're seeing it come back up, and we're in a spot where we discourage our bigger developers from accessing it because we just don't have the funding in that account. The bond has a category, the bond recommendations, not the bond, we're not there yet. The bond recommendations contain a similar line item, but a much bigger money amount to be able to provide incentives for private development to include affordable housing.
Excellent, thank you. Well, on the general fund aspect, I'll just note that I really do support the navigator aspect. That's going to be extremely important. I can't tell you how many dozens of people reach out and I send them to front door or contact the property managers that I know of. So there's obviously the demand and need in that aspect to help navigate this situation, as well as the home buyer assistance. Anything that's in a revolving fund is great. Let's be honest, especially when we're talking bonds that are one-time money. So that being said, I wanted to go to the bond aspect of this. So I definitely recognize the number one reason that it did not get through in my mind in 2018 was due to the lack of clarity and the lack of really time that we had to prepare for it, or the committee did. So I definitely recognize that is a top thing. But what was not on that list is the amount. The amount was also a problem to a lot of people I spoke with who would have otherwise been in support. In 2018, it was approved for $25 million. I really would suggest what it would look like for $20 million as well as $10 million. And as you have said, the dollar amount isn't spent in a single year. I think it may be smart strategically with the public that if we do a smaller amount, have the data to show how much impact this had, and then we can also, I'll be honest, like San Francisco did, Seattle did. They started with a smaller amount and had the proof, and then 4 years later, they did another bond and got more, and then 6 years later, I believe it was, they then asked for even more because they were able to prove to the public that this was effective, that this really helped people. And, the dollar amount asked for education purposes, well, that's a lot better if we have proof on the bonds and so forth that we have this. So I would like to suggest that we also provide a $10 million and $20 million, because in 2018 it was 25, and I know that turned off a good amount of people. That being said, again, anything related to revolving funds is a great idea, because that for the perpetuity of it. But my question regarding the bond and the eviction prevention. So when we were talking about ARPA, I had put in a request or suggestion that we engage in eviction prevention and set aside money for that purpose. I was told at that time that the federal government has supplied so much money, and not many people are taking advantage of the rental assistance dollars that are already there. And I understand the eviction moratorium changes things a bit, but the dollar amount and how much is designated for that purpose, I mean, we also have the county, other agencies that are specifically going for eviction prevention and diversion, and that it is being underutilized historically already. So I'm just wanted to get your 2 cents on that specific line item of the bond and how this is playing out now as opposed to a year ago.
Sure. Thank you for the question. The ARPA money is one time. And so while we did see a lot of that funding being utilized within our community, you're right, we have seen it drop off, and the county still has funding. That funding isn't going to stay forever. A housing commission was looking at what does the next 10 plus years look like. We know that money isn't staying forever. And so this is where this comes in, is because right now there is funding. You're absolutely correct. How long that's going to stay is unknown. And we have heard of no more rumblings from the federal government to keep propping up eviction prevention. So, and that was rather clear among the time that the eviction moratorium expired. As far as different funding amounts, I hear you. This is what the Housing Commission has approved. This isn't a staff invention. And so I'll be presenting these recommendations to the bond committee, a citizens bond committee, next week. I thought I had 2 weeks, and this week somebody said, no, Sarah, it's next week, and a little panic, but we're good. So I will carry that message to the Housing Commission. But this is what they voted upon to have presented to you guys. And now there's a Citizens Commission in between. So thank you for that feedback.
Thank
and
you.
Did I answer your eviction prevention question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
I just let's be conscientious of this 25 mil that failed. And if we are really looking for $40-50 million in bonding, strategically with the voters, it may be better, I'm saying this to council as well here, that we start with a lesser amount, prove itself, and do what has been successful in other cities, because this is the track record. I'd rather be able to have $10 million that gets approved than losing this completely when we put down $30 million as the suggestion. So that's kind of my thinking, that this is a staged process. Not all this money is going to be spent all at once anyways. So we can stagger and make sure we can convince the public that this would work. So that's all I really got to say in comments wise. So I'll turn it over. I know I'm taking waves. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
You're good. We've got Councilmember Shimoni and Councilmember McCarthy in the queue. Greg, I did just want to check in with you as far as timing. I know we said we would be flexible. How are you feeling about this? Is this the only venue for this? Just wanted to do a quick check.
Well, I think it's an important discussion. I would ask respectfully that we be very concise with our discussion here, questions and answers, so that we can hear from everybody. But I'm not going to suggest we truncate the discussion. It's a very important one, but I think it can move faster. Thank you.
Okay. Got it.
All right.
Okay, cue Adam. Get ready to make some money, Greg. Just kidding. Sarah, I originally turned my camera on just to express support for your emotions and the conversation you were having with Vice Mayor, because housing is so important. And we so appreciate the work that you and your team do for our community on this front. It's tremendous. The last council declared a housing emergency, and I just keep bringing that up because I think that's so important. And so I bring that up really just to let the budget team know that, going back to my original comment yesterday regarding how our emergencies look through in regards to the budgeting process, and just ask that the budget team, add extra weight with the emergencies that we've declared, housing being one of them. So, Sarah, I heard you say that CHAP is going to need $250,000. Are we basically tapping out that fund each year that we have, which I know has not always been replenished?
In the essence of brevity, yes.
Okay, that helps. And then I was glad to hear about the housing navigator position and that it's filling a need. I had that same question. And then is my math right, Sarah? When I look at the requests, it comes out to just under $800,000. Does that sound right to you?
I didn't add it. I would have to add it. But I trust that you do math the same as others do math.
I'm pretty sure it does. And I just wanted to make sure I'm on the same page with you and the team. And you can follow back up with me if not. And that's fine with me. I'm glad that housing and the team is asking for this money and working this in. I just think it's so important. And I just appreciate each of the different asks. And then lastly, in regards to the bond, yes, 2018 was rushed. It was big. 2020, we were extremely bummed to not be able to put this on the ballot. A lot of us were willing to, even though it was the heart of COVID. So 2022, I am so excited to help see this reach the ballot, and hopefully the council unanimous support to put this on the ballot, and we will help get the community across the finish line with this. I'm confident. I'm grateful for the commission and the different budget details that they've, aligned for us. I also struggle with the $50 million, but I'm curious to let this run its course through the Citizens Bonds Committee and come back to us. But I'm not necessarily wanting us to explore lesser amounts than the 3 recommendations that the commission's worked on. I think that's fine. And I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember McCarthy?
Thank you. Concerning the Housing Assistance Program, is that for city employees only, or is that for the public?
There's 2, Councilmember McCarthy. Thank you, Rick. I started trying to go to that slide on my own computer. The Community Homebuyer Assistance Program is for the community at large, and then the line underneath it, the Employer Assisted Housing Program, would be for city employees specifically.
Great answer, thank you. As far as framing this in a way that by this I mean the bond, in a way that the public would accept it, I think it's good to not give them the cost for 20 years. Maybe you have to do that, but also give them how much it is per year. I mean, the 20-year number is like, oh my God. But if you do it like per year, it's like, well, that's not maybe so bad. Just, framing is important. And then I just want to say I'm particularly supportive, and I was 4 years ago, of the revolving funds. If we can use money to help people get into housing, but then, and it may be 10, 20 years later, but we get that money back and then can reuse it, I think that's a very strong sales point, at least to me personally, but I also to the public. I do think it's probably worth the analysis of what the mayor suggested of smaller amounts. And then we, the council, can consider that in the context of all the other bonds that are coming through. I don't think we can consider that at this moment because we don't have the big picture yet. But I think if we did a smaller amount, I'd be interested in the Housing Commission's recommendations on how that would be split up. Now, that doesn't mean we're going to go that route, but I think when it comes time to make those decisions, we're going to need that data or that recommendation. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
So noted. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
Mary, do you have a comment?
Yeah, thank you. I just want to point out, first of all, I am in support of the housing bond as the concept, the areas that have been explored on many of the things that I said before. But for getting on the ballot, we have about $250 million in requests. We have $100 million bond limit, and we have all, unanimously as a council, decided we do not want to max out that credit card. So when we're considering, say, $50 million amidst, the 60 million for stormwater infrastructure, the 70 million request for climate action. I would just say for every single bond measure, it's not that I wouldn't want to see this through, but given resource constraints, we really, really need to prioritize, and the dollar amount is going to be a strong consideration on any bond, not just the housing, any bond that we're putting forth, whether I would support it on the ballot or even in support of it voting. So I just want us to be clear with our resource allocations, and that's why I'm asking for the 1020. That's why I really like the options. I mean, all the category options that have been provided by all of our different divisions and departments. It's very helpful, so that way we have those options and analyses available and those priorities at different dollar amounts. So I just wanted to comment on that and reiterate the dollar amount is extremely important for all these bonds, and let's make sure we have options at different levels, especially when a $25 million bond did not pass in 2018, and I truly want to see it get through this time. So just wanted to make that comment as we move forward. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. All right. Not seeing any other comments on this one. Sarah, excellent job. Thank you for the work that you do.
Thank you.
All right. To Greg and possibly to the mayor, we've got capital improvements, facilities, fleet, IT up next. We're about a little over an hour in. Are we okay to keep going and then possibly take a break in between if we need it, or do you want to do a quick break now instead? Keep going.
I'm neutral on it. Mayor, how do you feel?
I was getting a thumbs up.
Yeah.
I'm good to keep going unless council members may want to break. So please chime in, council members. Otherwise, we can proceed.
Excellent. I'll proceed. Thank you, Mayor. Good morning, all. I am Rick Barrett, the city engineer and your engineering director. Let me go back. You can see I don't have a tie on. I'm going to jump and follow Councilmember McCarthy's lead and pick something that wasn't on your list, Nicole, and that is I think I associate with the count for obvious reasons. So let me introduce Trevor to talk about this next slide, the one that's up on the screen. Trevor has been our acting capital improvements engineer for about 4.5 months now. And he'll briefly go over the capital improvements program, which directly ties to our work program for FY22 and for FY23. And with that, Trevor, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Rick. Good morning, everybody. Appreciate the time, opportunity to be here and talk about capital improvements. And with regards to resource allocation, I think first just wanted to talk about, let's see, our staff, the team, I guess I'd like to call it. So currently we have 6 full-time project managers. And currently right now, just last week, a couple of weeks ago, we started recruiting for 2 additional project managers. So soon we should have 8 project managers on board. So if you kind of look at it right now, we're a team of 6 doing the work of 8, which is fine. I mean, that I think we're always pushed to do good work and to do what we need to do. So that's exciting. I mean, we talk, we fall upon each other all the time to get information and just make sure we're doing well. And so as Rick mentioned, I've been in the role of the acting capital improvements engineer, so that position is currently vacant, and we will be working towards to get that filled. That recruitment, I think, actually hit the press or the website this morning, so that's out there. That's going to get going. One of the items in capital that we rely on and that we work towards, and everybody understands this document, it's called the Capital Improvements 5-Year Program. And I believe everybody's seen this document. It's a summary. It's usually around 12 to 14 pages. And it just includes everything that's kind of going to go forward and what programs and what projects are out there for the next 5 years, essentially. The program is an annual report included with the city's overall budget appropriation approval process. The program covers 5 years, traditionally in 3 phases. So right now we're in the current fiscal year, and then the proposed upcoming year, which would be FY23, and then future years. So usually it's another 3 years after that. So a total of 5 years that this program covers. And right now in capital, in FY22, our budget authority is approximately $180 million. So that means the projects that we're working on, what we're doing here in capital, if you were to sum them all up, it's about $180 million for this fiscal year. One of the things I wanted to just kind of highlight for our part of the presentation is on the screen we have a few projects that are highlighted in yellow. So I just wanted to go over them real quick and just kind of give everybody a sense of what's coming. So John Wesley Powell, Lone Tree to 4th Street. So this project will provide a connection from Pine Canyon to an area just south of Butler and 4th Street. Currently, the project is in a planning study for a preferred corridor alignment. The study takes into consideration and is working with the planned developments in the surrounding area. So we have Canyon del Rio that we're working with, Juniper Point's out there, and there's just other developments that are going on that we're just making sure that this particular project works well. Once the study is completed, it will be turned over to the planning section, and in that section, it will become a specific plan. And that specific plan will help us guide us in how it will look and go through the design and construction process. Another project I'd like to talk about is, again, John Wesley Powell from Lake Mary Road to the airport. So this project will provide a connection from Lake Mary Road to the airport. We expect to begin working on the design process in FY23. So most likely that will occur next spring. So maybe a year from now, we'll start looking at this project. The estimated budget, as identified in the program, is about $14 million. Another project to highlight is the Butler Avenue 4th Street improvements. I believe on the slide it's called Butler Avenue widening, but we are planning on adding some improvements on 4th Street. So this project will widen Butler Avenue from Little America to Sonawa Heights, and then it will also improve 4th Street from Sparrow Avenue, which is to the north of this intersection, to a portion or a section just south of Butler Avenue. And that's kind of near Canyon del Rio. The project is about to get into the design phase with a request for design services. We'd like to call that a request for a request for statements of qualification. And once that process, about 30% done, so that's actually design services. So when we get that to that point, then we'll go ahead and look for a construction manager at risk. And then that contractor will come on board and we'll just go ahead and finish that project. Right now, the project in the program is budgeted for $10 million. We are planning to do some improvements there that we're talking about. Is we'd like to widen Butler Avenue from 2 lanes to 4 lanes. We're also, some scope there is a landscape median separating those 2 additional lanes on either side. Also included will be a separated bike and pedestrian trail on both sides. Another project just to kind of talk about is 4th Street and Lockett. We're planning to put a roundabout in this area. If everybody understands or knows kind of where this particular project is, it's Cedar, Lockett, where that changes names, and then 4th Street. So this is kind of in the northeast section of Sunnyside. The project is being coordinated with ADOT for implementation. The project is working through the design process. Within our budget, we have programmed $1.8 million. And just to make sure we understand that this is also being coordinated with ADOT. So there is some federal funding associated with this project. And we also have it identified as highway improvements. Another project to kind of highlight is Beulah University. So this is a project that will extend Beulah Boulevard to University Avenue. So where it currently ends now, just by Forest Meadows, in coordination with the future development, a private development that will be going in called Milltown. The project is currently in the construction manager at risk phase, and we expect to receive the first GMP soon. We're hoping to get under construction as soon as possible once we get that GMP in front of council for approval. The project budget within the program is identified at about $7.3 million. However, a new estimate that just came in suggests about a $10 million budget shortfall. And as of right now, we are working through the budget process to fund this deficit. So lastly, before Rick takes over and finishes our presentation, I just wanted to maybe highlight some categories within the program that Capital works on. And when I say categories, I mean maybe programs or propositions or bond initiatives that have come through. So one of those programs is road repair and street safety. So this was a proposition that was voted upon in 2014 and it passed. And this program identified that safe and well-maintained streets is a core city service. So within that program, we started working on several areas that provided just updating, replacing, and improving streets within the city. So right now we're at the tail end of this program and just wanted to highlight Coconino Estates Phase 1 and 2, as well as West Flagstaff improvements. So on the slide in FY22, it's shown there as under construction right now. And we'll be finishing that here shortly. My guess is later this fall, we'll be finishing up with that entire program. Late yesterday, we talked, Water Services talked a little bit about their program, and they talked about water, drinking water, wastewater, reclaimed, and stormwater. Capital has always helped with the delivery of their projects when needed, and we're happy to do so at any time. I think we're just, we fit in what we can, and we just make sure everything works well and gets completed as an organization. So a couple of those projects to highlight are the Paradise Channel widening, and this project was related to the museum flood. It's upstream of where Paradise Avenue is right now in the very north section of Sunnyside. We've also done the Summit and Spring Waterline improvements, which is just west of City Hall here in the downtown area. And again, these are projects that are just about to get finished, or if not finished already, they're just going through the final closeout. Just wanted to highlight a few of those items that we've done. And the last category or program that I wanted to touch on, which I believe is very important and very critical to identify, is we've had several opportunities to work on facilities. I think everybody tends to get the idea that Capital works on roads, water lines, and items like that, curb and gutter. But we also have the opportunity to work on facilities. And so we were able to deliver the court facility. The court facility, which is just north of City Hall here in the downtown area, was part of Proposition 412. And that was voted on in 2016. And funds from Proposition 412 were used to build a new court facility. So just to kind of to wrap my section up, the program is kind of what we live in here in Capitol, and just to make sure that we're working hard and doing what we need to do to deliver for the city of Flagstaff. Thank you. I'll go ahead and turn it back over to Rick.
Awesome. Thank you, Trevor. Yeah. Councilmember Sweet, I know your comment or your note in the chat said after Rick is finished. Do you still want to wait until then?
I can go now.
Okay.
I guess. Yeah. Thank you, Trevor, and thank you, Rick. I'm just wondering, can you speak to the public engagement process on our larger capital projects?
Go ahead, Trevor.
Thank you, Rick. Council member. So what we do with our larger projects is we tend to, when we start through that process, the design, kind of getting that in the planning stage, we talk with our stakeholders, we talk with the project owners, and then we start implementing who we need to get the word out to, and then figure out what this project scope is going to be about. And then what we do is we try to get a public information firm or a public outreach firm on board, and then we begin to get the word out. Now lately, we've been focusing on what the project is, but I do believe we have a lot of tools. I think earlier we've talked about toolboxes and items that we have that we can help make the project go a little better, and even the program go a little better. So what we tend to do now is we're starting to look at maybe trying to get out in front of some of these projects. So the projects that I highlighted earlier in my presentation are ones that maybe might be good for getting a larger discussion going, and maybe getting council involved and getting the public input received earlier. So those are some items that we would like to start discussing with staff, and maybe even getting council meetings, a work session, or some type of meeting out front to begin that discussion. Did that help?
That did, and I would find that very helpful to get in front of the projects instead of backpedaling. It's
Right.
wonderful how engaged our community is, but I can see the challenge as well. So I think if we bring the community along with us from the beginning, it might be helpful, especially on the bigger projects. Thank you, Trevor. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you, Councilmember Sweet, for that question. One thing I'll just be open and honest about, and I think I've said in the past, is it is difficult when we're having policy discussions project by project. So my hope, the twinkle in my eye, is that we can, advance the active transportation master plan, as well as, other key components of the regional plan and carbon neutrality, so that we can start to get those discussions happening in terms of what do we really want in terms of bike and ped. And when we're talking protected intersections, what does that exactly mean? We had a great bicycle pedestrian advisory committee meeting last night, and we are all recognizing the need to provide a more upfront approach in terms of, what are we even talking about? Again, my hope is that we can start to advance that larger discussion and keep it away from project specifics, so that when council tells us, hey, we want a protected intersection, we all know what we're talking about. Because I think some of those details, and this is new to our community. This is something we've wanted. I think the reality for all of us is that, yes, bike, pedestrian, and transit priority is here. It is real, and we need to take it head on. And yes, we're seeing it manifest itself right now at the project level, but again, my hope is that we can elevate that discussion through the ATMP process and really start understanding exactly what a buffered bike lane is, or what all the tools are that we have to help give the community what they're looking for, whether it's in the neighborhood, an arterial intersection. We have all sorts of tools, so I'll leave it there. But thank you for the question.
Thank you, Rick.
Okay, so with that, Trevor, really thank you for all his efforts, and he's been doing an awesome job. But let me just reiterate that the 5-year program is sort of an actuarial in terms of compiling and analyzing available funding. That's the important part. In working with Rick Tatter and his team, we have to make sure that our program that Trevor is talking about is tied back to the available funding. Sometimes that's grants, sometimes that's bond funds, sometimes that's HERF revenues. Comes in all shapes and forms. Capital improvements doesn't operate and maintain anything when we're done with this, so obviously we have a lot of work in terms of coordinating with, the term Trevor used as an owner. We recognize right off the bat, again, we don't operate and maintain. So we got to work with water services for water and sewer lines. We got to work with facilities when we're building a courthouse. We got to work with Public Works and Scott Overton and his team in regards to building streets and what have you. But there's a lot of work there. I mean, we got to figure this out, and we've got to make sure that it is solid in terms of the staffing that we can provide to the community. And as Trevor mentioned, inflation, holy cow, inflation has really hit us hard. And, you all know that we're working with decimal points and commas that are a lot different than our personal checkbooks. Inflation is hitting us hard. Trevor mentioned $10 million on a $9 million project. So Beulah University is now a $19 million project, and we are looking square at a bond sale. But rest assured that Rick Tatter, team, and I are working closely together to get this all figured out. With that, yes, thank you, Artad, for moving the slides. So, the key thing that I want to mention on this first bullet point is related to the Rio de Flag flood control project. We've been using the term downtown mile. Downtown mile is essentially the railroad or BNSF Railways required mitigation for us to be able to deliver a handful of projects. It's the Lone Tree Overpass. It's the PED crossing that's adjacent to the Rio de Flag. It's another PED crossing that connects La Plaza Vieja neighborhood to the town site off to the west of Milton Road. All of this manifests itself into a new bridge across Milton, which connects with the Arizona Department of Transportation's corridor master plan for Milton that indicated that we should have a couple extra lanes for capacity on that roadway. So a great opportunity to work with BNSF to get that bridge rebuilt. But as you can imagine, the funding associated with what I just talked about is just gigantic. It's a lot of funding. We had initially thought that we were going to be part of the bond committee's discussions in terms of being on the ballot. I think we've made the right choice lately to say we've pulled ourselves out of that, recognizing all the other needs this community has and recognizing also that there are quite a few grant opportunities available for us to advance the downtown mile. Some of those opportunities you've heard about, right? We've got our bipartisan infrastructure bill. It's a law now. We've got some other acronyms. I'm not even sure I know what they stand for, so I will apologize initially for this, but we've got a RAISE grant opportunity that's still coming around, and then we've got a CRISI grant opportunity, which is pretty much tied to federal rail initiatives, which obviously aligns very well with what we're trying to do here. So again, we have a bunch of opportunities that we can chase to get these projects funded and hopefully relieve some pressure on the bond committee in working through their very difficult task. We all know that bike and pedestrian and urban trails are of high priority to the council. It's high priority to us as we get the active transportation master plan in place. We talked yesterday that there could be some future grant opportunities to advance, even more than we thought we could do in the 20-year 419 tax initiative. And then all of the work program, as I mentioned before, is dependent on available funding. But part of what we need to be focusing on, as was discussed yesterday, is the effort that it's going to take to put forth our best effort on these grant applications. We have to pay very close attention to the criteria that whatever the specific grant is, that we're seeking. There's specific criteria associated with each of those grant opportunities. We have to align ourselves with that criteria so that we can, rise to the top of an application process and get awarded these valuable funds. And I do have a map of the downtown mile that I can share here in a minute. We listed the Sunnyside neighborhood improvements because I personally felt this is really important for all of us to remember, is that we have a commitment to the Sunnyside neighborhood to complete the build out of curb, gutter, and sidewalk in that neighborhood. We've got about $4 million remaining in our estimates to complete, and all that work is primarily in the northeast corner of the Sunnyside neighborhood, up by Ellen and Rose, just to name a few streets. We're counting right now on the sale of auto mall lots. There are 2 remaining lots that are currently valued at about $1.6 million. You'll see that we will be asking for budget authority to spend that $1.69 million in our budget process coming up that we're in the middle of right now. But again, that's just budget authority because we won't actually have the money until those lots physically sell. So capital improvements is standing ready to at least advance another half of the remaining work that's out there. Or somewhere in that neighborhood. And then lastly, we've got, of course, carbon neutrality on our minds. There is a lot of work to advance that critical community-supported effort led by Nicole and her team. Nicole and I have been talking. She mentioned yesterday some needs. Specifically, what will land in the engineering division. This is beyond capital improvements because it mostly impacts our transportation section led by our traffic engineer, Jeff Bauman. But we are thinking that we could have another FTE for multimodal interests. There's probably another FTE associated with transportation engineering in general. And then with all that combined, there's public outreach that's necessary. So we've listed here an engagement coordinator. And then again, to help Nicole's efforts, transportation demand management, which we heard about a couple Tuesdays ago. We began that discussion with council and the community. That's an important, probably an FTE associated with that effort as well. But we have not input any of these positions into the FY23 budget process at this point in time, kind of tying back to the efforts of our Citizen Bond Committee. But as soon as funding is available, we would be glad to jump into that. So Rick, if you could just advance real quickly to the next 3 slides. So here's a picture of the downtown mile. I think council has seen it. To our left is the Florence Walnut project, which is west of Milton, as I mentioned. Then moving to the east or to the right, you can see we've pointed out the Milton Bridge, which is basically the crux of this BNSF mitigation we're referring to. Moving on to the east again, you can see that we have the Rio de Flag, and then that red down below the railroad track symbology there is the location of the Downtown Connection Center. And then way off to the right, you can see our Lone Tree Overpass project. Next slide, please. You've all seen this project picture at nauseum probably at this point. We've been working on this project since '04. Frustrating we haven't moved the ball at this point, but we are making tremendous progress. You all know we're funded with the Rio de Flag and the Army Corps of Engineers. So again, this is a picture. We're quite proud of all the effort that's gone into it at this point, and a lot of work to come. Very impactful to our work program. We've been managing it as best we can right now with the resources that we got. When this project does go full bore into construction, there may be need for an additional FTE. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. And next slide, please. And then lastly, this is the picture of the Sunnyside neighborhood I mentioned. You can see in the northeast corner, that's the green streets that you have listed there. Primarily, that work is to add curb gutter and sidewalk in a neighborhood right now that just has asphalt streets. And with that, Mayor, I am available for any questions council may have. Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity today.
All right. Not seeing any questions on that one. Rick, you were thorough. Okay.
Hey,
oh, Councilmember Shimoni.
That's exactly the word I want to be. That's the word I want to hear. Thank you.
Oh my gosh. Hi, Rick and Trevor and Nicole. Of course, I have a lot to say on this topic. I'm going to try to keep it brief because I know we're behind on time. Rick, thank you for the presentation. And in learning about your retirement, I want to say thank you for your service to the city for 40 years. That's remarkable, and we really appreciate your leadership and are excited for you. And I really enjoyed working with you, Rick. I really have. Couple of questions. So, when I think about the capital improvement list, the CIP 5-year plan, I think about bike and ped needs and safety needs as part of the different projects that we're implementing, right? Like you talked about with Butler and such, which I'm, so grateful for. But then I also think about all the other needs that we need to do for bike and ped in the community that we're relying on 419 money for, the 29.5 million or whatever it is. And I recently saw that presentation at a committee meeting by Martin, and that money's not going to get us there, right? The Mountain Line grant helps. That 5.5 million that we got from them, that helps a little bit, but even that is scratching the surface of what we need to do. And Rick, you and I have talked about this plenty, and you've told me, our 5-year plan is full. We got a lot on our plate. If we're going to want to take on some of those other things that you're talking about, speaking to me, we would have to push the pause button and create more space on our 5-year plan. So I guess my question is, considering our limitations with funding, personnel, et cetera, what are the lowest priorities on that 5-year plan, that make up that $180 million effort?
Thank you for that question, council member. I think that's the critical question, right? I mean, it really boils down to prioritizing because we don't have enough money to do everything.
Right.
So, as Trevor explained, and I'll go back to the owners that we have the honor to work with all the time. So as capital tries to sort out the answer to your question, it does involve a larger discussion with city leadership, quite honestly. Somebody might think that maybe up water and sewer lines is, and I'm just using that as an example, okay? Please don't anybody get mad at me here. But that's the discussion we're going to get into, right? So we either have to hire more staff in capital improvements so that we can deliver more of the funded projects, or we got to look back into the list of the commitments we've already made to Team Flagstaff and figure out, okay, and help water services, again, as an example, figure out how are we going to advance the important needs of replacing aging infrastructure. I mean, these water lines and sewer lines are, in some cases, 100 years old. Anyhow, again, just an example.
Right.
Road repair and street safety, capital improvements end of this equation is about done. Scott Overton and his team are going to be continuing on with that funding source for another 13 years to have robust overlays, capital improvements. We just got charged with the task of, those full reconstruct projects that you're well aware of. We got into adding sidewalks in people's front yards. That's complicated work. Building facilities, Trevor, boy, oh boy, in a limited amount of time, it's hard to leave out how important that new library entrance is going to be. We're helping Water Services with a new digester out at the Wildcat treatment plant. Our project managers are busy. So we have to look at the program in its totality if we want to start pulling somebody off of one thing and start working on another thing. And I think you get it. And before any of that discussion can happen, Rick Tatter is going to tell me we can't start thinking about moving somebody to something that isn't even funded. So a lot of moving pieces there. I apologize.
No, Councilmember, before you go on, I just want to clarify for the purposes of what we're trying to achieve from today for direction.
Right.
Is this presentation? I just want to make sure that we're creating the space we need to get that input.
So Nicole and Rick and City Manager Clifton and Mayor, I guess my question is, in regards to today's conversation, I do think that we need to make changes to our 5-year plan. And I think that other items need to be raised up to a certain level of priority that make it onto this plan. And I know that's a bigger conversation we're not going to have today. Nicole and team, City Manager, I don't know when we have that conversation or how we have that conversation. The City Mayor is raising his hand. But I do think our priorities need to be evaluated and reevaluated and adjusted. I really do believe that. And I'll let Mayor jump in if that's appropriate, Nicole.
Thank you, Councilmember, and I agree to a point. I mean, a lot of it is the devil's in the details. So as we've experienced with the Lone Tree Overpass, but as we look at this list of capital improvement projects, Rio to Flag Flood Control Project, we've all agreed this is the number one thing that we need to accomplish. We've gotten over $100 million allocated towards this purpose, 152, if I recall correctly. We have to get that done. The downtown mile projects all connect to that. The Lone Tree Overpass is mandated by the public in their votes. The 419 projects, though, I think allow for a little more flexibility. And also, again, with the devil in the details, we've experienced that as well a week and a half ago with the Lone Tree Overpass, that we are able to include a lot of the measures you and I both would like to see put forth. So in terms of the 5-year plan or 5-year program, I think especially looking at how staff has presented the ordering of starting with Rio to Flag is very appropriate, and that a lot of the changes that we need to make for climate action and otherwise and multimodal transportation are more internal to those specific projects and more the devil of the details situation. And the 5-year program plan is a little bit more, maybe not 30,000 feet, but 10,000 feet above the situation. And what we want to see accomplished is more a lot of it on the ground. So,
and Mayor, go ahead, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say that, I agree with you. And in addition to what you're saying, specifically, just to give you all a thought, insight of what I'm thinking about the bike pilot on Butler and what needs to be done to fix that. Because I do think there's a lot we learned from that. And I know we haven't had that conversation yet, Rick. But I actually really I believe it's your idea of elevating that level of the bike lane up to the curb level and making it double foots. I think that's brilliant. And I think that's going to cost about $2 million. And so we need to be ready for that. And I'd like to, see us do that efficiently versus prolong a bike pilot that isn't, successful. And then, the nice thing about that, Rick and team, is that will then connect to the Lone Tree section and then continue eastward on Butler, and we'll have double foots all along Butler. I mean, that's incredible. That's one example, Rick and team. Another one is safe intersections at San Fran and Butler and Beaver and Butler. 2 of our more dangerous intersections that connect the university to our downtown. And there's some funding in the $5.5 million grant from Mountain Line, but we need additional money for it. Don't know where that's going to come from, Rick. Maybe, again, opportunities for grants from the federal level, but if we're not prepared and ready for these opportunities, we're going to miss them, and we're not going to take them in stride. And Trevor, that's kind of a comment to you too, I guess. and then also Milton being one of our most dangerous corridors for pedestrians. We need to have that as something we can address, not necessarily Milton itself, but an alternate for bike and ped parallel to Milton. And Martin has a plan for all these things. Mary, go ahead.
I see, Mayor, and Mayor, if you need to go first, that's fine. But Greg, I do also want you to weigh in on what we need to get out of today's conversation versus are there other venues for this? Because I am cognizant of how far off we are on the time schedule.
Yeah, thank you, Clifton. Please go ahead.
Well, I think it's a very important discussion. And back to an earlier question, if the discussion does not occur here, I'm not sure where it occurs. I think we can, if there's interest in tweaking the 5-year plan, maybe we slate this for a work session discussion. It goes without saying, there are projects here that Rick and Trevor have spoken to that cannot be revisited. And the mayor's alluded to the Rio as probably the best example, but there are other ones. Sorry, I'm on a cell phone here and I'm moving around. But there may be some things that are subject to reprioritization. It's hard to have this discussion in isolation when we're talking about so many things. Yesterday, wastewater, stormwater, we've had housing, we've had sustainability. Every one of those components involves a lot of capital work, some more than others. Some are a little more programmatic, but many of them are infrastructure related. And it's just hard to isolate and say, well, we just want to talk about bike and ped. I think the bigger discussion is where are the priorities, and if we are looking at reprioritizing some projects on this 5-year plan, we can't do that in isolation without talking about some of these other things going on. I mean, we cannot have all focus on bike and ped and not have any discussion about flood mitigation or transportation or some of the other, or not transportation out, but some of the projects that have been discussed that fall into that realm. So I think it all has to be, it's kind of mind-blowing, frankly, but I think all these things have to be looked at in totality when we're having this discussion. I think right now what I'm hearing is, well, can we set aside this, and talk about more bike and ped infrastructure? And I fear that we're having that discussion at risk of not looking at the bigger picture, as important as it is.
Greg, is a work session, is that an option within your time frame?
I think it has to be. I don't know that we're going to get through it today. I don't want to stop this discussion from occurring. I don't have the agenda in front of me, and you'll have to remind me what lies ahead here.
We've got facilities and fleet and IT after this.
And it's 10:20, and we're looking at going until about the noon hour. I guess I would invite this discussion to continue, recognizing we may not have conclusion on it. I think maybe we need to focus on some big picture here. If there are some projects in the 5-year queue, the 5-year plan that need to be reconsidered or reprioritized, I would say let's have that discussion. But we will run out of time here fairly soon.
So Nicole, can I just maybe finish? I'll try to breeze through the rest of my comments, and then Rick can kind of take that and chew on it, and we can maybe, city manager, have a future discussion with the council. I do feel like we need to have these conversations, and I wait for the opportunities to do them, and it's very difficult because these are big changes that I'm pushing for. But city manager, with your expertise and leadership, and mayor and Rick, I think we can get there. I do feel like now's an important time to have a lot of this conversation, but I guess maybe not. We don't have the time to do it. So Nicole, do you want me just to run through my points really quick and then let it be?
Why don't we do that? Why don't you share the input? Let's get that out there. And then I've got the mayor and Councilmember McCarthy in the queue, and then we'll do kind of a check.
That sounds very good to me. So on the topic of process, I'm glad to hear what Trevor mentioned about bringing it forward to the public and to the council first. And I think, Rick, you spoke to that too. I think we could follow a similar process to the rezone or CUP process, where there's public input, it goes to the commissions, and that way we can really move forward on the right note first. That's my comment there. And then with regard to grant funding, again, I just think it's so crucial that we are positioning ourselves in a place where we can take advantage of those grant opportunities. And I think that, again, comes down to the 5-year plan and how we prioritize our efforts. In regards to recruitment and transportation demand management positions and such on this slide here at the bottom, I definitely think that that should be funded. Council, mayor, budget team, I think that's extremely important. I think Martin's a one-man show in a lot of ways, and he can only do so much. And we are, like Rick said, we're changing. This is all new for the city. And I'm so excited, right? I'm so excited, and I know our team is, but I think we need help. So city council, I think we need to fund some of these positions that are at the bottom of the screen here. And then I do want to throw out the idea of bringing in an outside consultant to maybe just have another set of eyes on our designs to ensure that we're really doing this right. And then also to help with the AT&P in terms of creating a plan that can connect the whole city. And I know Martin's working on that, but I think he mentioned to me that he would benefit from another set of eyes helping him. And I know that consultants have done this for other cities, and we can talk more about that if there's council support for that funding component. And then Rick, I do think we need to have policy change in regards to design standards and such. And I'd like to see that as part of your leadership, is leading that policy change with council, hearing from council loud and clear. We need that policy change. I've got 10 plus months to finish this strong. And so I'm hoping we can do that in the next 10 months with your help. And then lastly, for projects like Beulah University that are doubling in cost, like you mentioned, maybe we reconsider some of these things and reconsider our plans. I don't know, just trying to think outside the box in regards to the rising in costs. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Councilmember Shimoni. I will just mention a lot of this we're going to get into a little more thoroughly in the next budget session. A little more detail, and I'm looking forward to a work session where we can discuss this even more thoroughly. I will reiterate my support for the Beaver and San Francisco Butler intersections and how we are planning. I feel that the Lone Tree Overpass needs a larger spectrum of planning that includes a larger geographic area. With San Francisco Beaver, to see about maybe taking a lane to allow for bike ped transit, given that there's 70% expected less traffic on those areas. Aside from that, we can pick that up at later times. I do want to mention, though, as we talk about inflation with these capital improvement projects, to be frank, economists like myself are concerned that it will continue to remain the same level of inflation rate. With the infrastructure bill going through, there's going to be a far higher demand for our trade skill workers, our material supplies, that we as the United States as a whole are not prepared to be able to accomplish. High demand, low supply. We all know about the labor shortage far before what we're facing now in the trade skill workers in America. So with all of these projects, with all of what we are discussing, we all need to be very conscientious of the inflationary costs that are going to limit our ability to accomplish projects. And I want to accomplish them. And I agree with Councilmember Shimoni, priorities are going to be key in that aspect. That's my only comments, and I'll kick it off to McCarthy here.
Okay. Councilmember McCarthy.
Well, thank you. I think one of the things I learned about all of our Lone Tree discussions are that people made all kinds of general comments, but they didn't make specific recommendations. So that's my first comment. And I guess what tied into that is we need to be more specific. For instance, we've just heard 2 council members say that they would support improving the intersections at Butler and San Francisco and Beaver, maybe some changes in the sidewalk/foots trail along Butler. I think those are great ideas. But where's the money going to come from? And in getting back to specifics, what programs do people want to cut from the list? At some point, we're going to have that discussion. It's really easy to add things to the list. It's very difficult to say, okay, we're going to set such and such of a project, maybe Sunnyside neighborhood improvements. I'm not suggesting that, but maybe we have to have specifics on where we want to cut or where we're going to get new money. So just these general discussions are not as productive as a detailed discussion. And of course, the other thing is, I don't think we're going to cut into a sewage plant budget and put that into transportation for bicycles. No, those are in completely different categories. We have enterprise funds. So I assume that we're not talking about general fund money to go to the water treatment plants. So a discussion has to say, okay, here's the list of possible places we could steal the money or transfer the money. And then we have to set priorities. Just to say adding stuff to the list, that's a half of a discussion. I think I'm done.
Point well taken. Okay, let's do this. Staff will put some effort into kind of how do we go forward and have some additional discussion. We are well beyond not just the time frame for this conversation, but beyond really the typical kind of cycle for highest cognition and optimal conversation. So let's do a 6-minute break. So a little bit longer than 5, but not as long as 10. Go to the restroom, get that blood flow going again, get some extra coffee, drink some water, and then we'll come back. So that would put us back, let's say we're starting at 10:34. All right, inhale, exhale, go to break. All right, so we are back in action. Let's do this. Vice Mayor, I'm with you. Okay, we have 2 segments left for conversation and presentation: facilities and fleet, and information technology. Thank you, Councilmember Aslan. Hi ho. I was hoping for a repeat of the Kermit. Maybe we'll get that before the end of the meeting. So we move into this section again. We want to balance between the time that we have available, also having the conversations that we need to have. So kind of keeping an eye on that both in presentation and conversation. And really kind of like staying focused, staying with it. I think we're good to go. Everybody take a deep breath. We'll buckle in and we will turn it over to, I think, Scott, are you up first?
I am. Thank you, Nicole.
All right.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. As we've been listening for the last day and a half or so, we've clearly heard a lot about bonding projects and the capacity and how to fund these. We also recognize in our organization that we have some general fund needs that may or may not fall into a bonding capacity or category. And I'm going to speak to 2 in particular that live in the public works world. And both of these, facilities and fleet, generally have general fund implications. And what we've been doing is trying to identify within both programs the true capital need that is required to start moving in a direction that would be a little more proactive and probably a little bit more of investment within our existing infrastructure. So just to keep it pretty high level, we are not talking new facilities in terms of building, a fire station or a new park or a swimming pool. At this juncture, we're focused more on the maintenance facilities management role of maintaining what we have. And I put on the top of this slide, and I think it speaks well to what we're focused on at this point, which is the commitment to community facilities, demonstrating a focused attention on asset preservation, maintenance, and the high quality energy stewardship. So as of late, we've been evaluating our facilities that are existing. And in a city inventory, we have 1 million square feet with about 100 structures with a 116-year spread. Our oldest facility is the Milligan House at a 1904 construction. And of course, our newest facility is the 2020 courthouse on Cherry and Beaver. I think it's important for you to understand, and most of you have been through all of our facilities to a degree. We have lots of different uses and complex needs with different funding resources. So for example, the airport, more of an enterprise fund. Recent federal stimulus has helped them move some of their project work. We have lots of different uses that are somewhat complex. The Aquaplex is very different than the Public Works facility or a firehouse or the police department, which is a county facility. So each individual asset is really a different level of complexity. And that's really for us to try to figure out, but for you to understand, we really have taken a lot of that into account. But my focus for this morning is the general fund side of the assets, and not to get into the weeds of individual projects or the prioritization of those. We have a different process for that, but the city's responsibility is to all assets, and we're really working hard to try to understand that as best as possible and prioritize funding programs. What we did was we've created a facility advisories committee, and this committee really has general representation from all of our users, and that would be really tenants, right? If facilities owned and the city owned the facility or asset, the representation of all of the user groups has been welcome and frankly encouraged to the advisory committee. Because what I'd like to see is we've recognized in Public Works, this group, facilities has been really a program that's not had a lot of staff support, not by anybody's fault, but we have a lot of needs. It's a small group of 9 individuals if fully staffed. We're right now at 6, but they tend to put out fires. And I think what the Facility Advisory Committee has done is done a good job of trying to identify through our asset inventories all of the prioritized projects that need to get completed that are a little bit bigger ticket items. The small stuff like doorknob fixes and broken windows, that would fall to our maintenance day-to-day team. The capital renewal projects are more major. So think of windows, roofing, sidings, maybe an HVAC system or a boiler. They're fairly large capital renewal projects, and that's really become the focus of our Facility Advisory Committee and why we're here to you today to talk about the need in facilities to kind of focus on that effort a little bit. We clearly have also worked to try to find efficiencies in delivery. If a boiler is going to be installed at the City Hall, we think it's wise to evaluate the one at the facility next door being the library. And if they're both deemed an essential need, wouldn't it make sense to bundle those 2 projects, not only look at them from a delivery standpoint, but the energy efficiency standpoint, and try to deliver those through one procurement to try to save some value on the general fund side. So we've really started to talk better as a group, and I think we're going to find some pretty good successes as the years go on of bundling these projects and delivering them in an efficient manner. And remember, existing assets, not the future. Next slide, please. This Facilities Advisory Committee has really done this type of work with this Venn graph. And what it demonstrates for you is top circle, prioritized repair. We've taken asset inventories of all of our structures. We've tried to go through those as a facilities group, understand them, present them to the FAC, and make a prioritized list of this is the highest priority list needed repair. The list can be long, and frankly, we're not going to get to all the repairs because if you look at the second and third circle, we also have limited financial resource and we have limited project delivery. So by utilizing our Public Works senior project manager and maybe the assistance of outside contractors and to some degree city engineering staff, if we match all 3 of these up, the financial resource through budget, general fund, we prioritize the repair, we understand what to deliver, the center of this diagram would represent the work that we can move forward and deliver. Doesn't make a lot of sense to give us $10 million if we can't deliver it and we haven't prioritized the repair. So we've done this exercise, and now I'm focused on the center of this graph. Next slide, please. This past year, we did a similar exercise, but not quite as involved. We completed some chambers enhancement project work. The City Hall window replacement project is now in design with our on-call architectural firm and engineering group. Adam Yali's running that effort, and we anticipate in the next few months to have design and a procurement path to deliver the City Hall and the main library window project. The boiler projects at City Hall and the main library were two examples I gave earlier, but they are also funded in today's program, and we are aware of them. We're working with our outside consultants, Noresco, and with our sustainability group to finalize the replacement units that will go into those two facilities. And it's important to note that that is the work that is ongoing right now. Some of that will carry forward into next year as we deliver those projects. But our annual appropriation is $270,000 a year. I will tell you, if we did some calculations based on 100 buildings, and I think a lot of you can relate to this, $270,000 a year for capital renewal isn't quite getting the job done. So if I went back and thought about my Venn graph of earlier, and if I were to think about prioritizing the list, asking for a financial resource to match that, and having an ability to deliver that project work next year, what would that take? And my request of you is to consider general fund contribution of $500 to $1 million. Much smaller ask than you've heard over the last couple of days. But remember, we're fairly limited in what we can deliver, and we're fairly limited in cash. We know that it's tight on the general fund side, but I will tell you, it's reasonable in my opinion, from the facilities perspective. 500,000 to $1 million in addition to our 270 gets us to a place where we start to really tackle some projects. We've identified 13 projects for next year that we would like to do. It also requires the commitment to a project manager position that you spoke about or heard about yesterday as new positions requested. But if we can line up those three items, 500,000 to $1 million gets us to where we can deliver next year, in addition to the projects we'll wrap up this year. That really fills the gap of capital renewal projects for next year. I would anticipate in the future years, 23, 24, 25, you're likely going to see me come back and say, okay, we've got those completed. We feel good about it. Here's the next group of projects. And we're now starting to really build the 5 and 10-year program looking out for facilities and being much more realistic with not only what we can deliver, but what the financial resources to maintain our existing facilities and keep them full of pride in what you expect of what a facility would look like. I want to stop there briefly and ask questions about facilities, and the next one I'm going to jump into is very brief about fleet.
Mayor?
Thank you, Scott. I was just wondering because I wasn't aware of. Well, I hadn't heard of it previously, but is there any money in the infrastructure project or infrastructure law now that is earmarked for facilities maintenance or anything of that sort? Just thinking about funding opportunities, and I hadn't heard about that, if that was a possibility. So just wanted to ask.
We continue to sort through all of the new federal resources that are starting to come to fruition, and I'm not sure. I think we continue to look at those. We continue to seek guidance through Stacy BK and all of our resources here at the city. We have not identified any funding resource. This has traditionally been general fund. Most often, my experiences have been once you own and build the facility, there is some general obligation, responsibility upon the municipality to maintain their facility in perpetuity. And that's really kind of a clause within a lot of those types of grant dollars, but we certainly continue to investigate those. I'm open to them because I think it would be a great opportunity, but I'm not totally sure that some of this work will qualify for that at this time.
Great. Thank you. And that's what I kind of expected the answer would be. I know they're still defining rules and so forth. Mm-hmm. So it was just a more curiosity question if you had heard if there was anything out there. But yeah, I do see city manager here.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Greg, I see you've got your hand up to jump in.
Thank you. I would just echo Scott's response. It was a very good question, but I don't think what we're talking about here, and I'm so glad to hear this come forward to council. I really like this facilities team and what they're endeavoring to accomplish. We have had discussions before council about the declining state of many of our facilities and how we've fallen a bit behind the curve in not just in updating and keeping up with capital needs with our existing facilities, but also taking care of the facilities that we have decommissioned, so to speak. And we're making progress on that. There's a lot of progress yet to follow. But absent doing things in partnership with perhaps other nonprofits and things, and projects like that, and I'm going to yesterday's discussion about Joel Montalvo and looking at the future discussion regarding the Thorpe Park Annex. I think those are going to be very good candidates for grant funding because there's a purpose behind them, a community benefit. But when you look at what Scott's talking about, just in and of itself, we're really just talking about maintaining our existing facilities. And I just don't personally think that positions these things nicely for grant opportunities. I do think it's something that arguably should be a general fund appropriation to accommodate. And I think this conversation is a bit overdue, so I'm glad to see it be advanced. Anyway, those are my comments. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, City Manager Clifton, and I concur. And I think what you see is we're working on a lot of different types of projects, and the Joel Montalvo and possibly the redevelopment of a site using some of that money you spoke of yesterday. Very different purpose, but we're still involved. This really is, just as it was said, focused on our existing facilities in need. And we certainly recognize there's more than $1 million worth of work, but I'm trying to balance the personnel we have available to deliver, the financial, just realities, and a prioritized list of need. And Mr. Clifton, I don't know if your hand's still up or.
No, I need to lower my hand. Sorry, man.
No problem. Just want to make sure we got you in there. Okay, so thank you, Mayor. The second one, shifting gears a little bit, is our fleet. Fleet is also a group that is housed in the Public Works Division. It is responsible for the city rolling stock, demonstrating the focused attention to our asset preservation, maintenance, and replacement of vehicles and equipment. Again, very similar role as facilities, but this has a lot to do with our vehicles and our equipment and apparatus and things you all know and see. There are approximately 700 units of unique vehicles, and this can range from a lawnmower all the way up to some of our larger fire apparatus and quints, police vehicles, public works facilities vehicles, public works streets vehicles, trash trucks. And as you can imagine, not only is it unique and complex, it's expensive. We have a total of a $26.8 million fleet value. That is the value if the entire fleet were to be replaced in what its existing dollars are. Clearly, if we had to go buy it all brand new, going to be a different number, but it's an expensive fleet to try to maintain. Again, I spoke to the unique uses and complex needs. Lots of different funding sources here as well. Streets is covered with HERF Fund, for example. Solid Waste takes care of their funding streams through the fees of trash and recycle customers. And then General Fund pays for a lot of fleet going to general services and essential general services. So a fire engine, a police vehicle, a parks truck, some of our large mowers, all the things that our general services would provide are of general fund source. So I want to focus here on, again, general fund. We do have a robust replacement criteria, and by robust, I almost mean difficult. We mileage vehicles age by miles, age, maintenance costs, and service reliability. We run most of our equipment and vehicles as hard and as long as possible. Oftentimes, it's a little bit beyond those limits that have been established. Different criteria is established for all different types of equipment. And this is not the time to get into why or how we get into those criteria, but there's a fleet advisory committee. And this Fleet Advisory Committee maintains and really works with Fleet to make sure we're meeting those milestones. And just because a piece of equipment might meet a milestone or an age doesn't mean we move it on, or doesn't mean we don't keep it within the fleet. Oftentimes you'll see us move equipment within the organization. So it might make more sense to move a vehicle out to the landfill for a use that maybe doesn't get as much mileage, but the vehicle can still work for us for a few years. And I've always been admired by the fleet. I've always admired the fleet and their ability to be nimble and be creative with how we repurpose. The Facility Advisory Committee has a role in that process, not only in the evaluation, but in repurposing our fleet to its highest utilization. They also provide fleet recommendations to the budget team and to you as council. And we, of course, focus on emerging technologies and advancement. In fact, in the next couple of weeks, you'll see the first purchase of 2 electric pickups that are coming up, which are cool to see coming up. They're coming out of the enterprise funds side of the house, however. Next slide, please. Right now, the general fund is the greatest fund in need. HER fund is paying for streets vehicles, solid waste is solid waste, other funds pay for their items, but general fund, those vehicles I spoke to, fire engines, police cars, parks vehicles, those are of the greatest need. Currently, there is $760,000 per year being budgeted towards replacement. Replacement slip is occurring, and by replacement slip, I mean when units come to end of useful life, they can no longer function or be utilized in our organization, we have to replace them. A good example would be a police car. It will get to end of life. If a police car wears out, we replace it out of the 765. If a fire engine wears out, we replace it out of the 765. If a streets vehicle, a parks vehicle, or a building inspector's vehicle, all comes out of the 765. What we've seen is the 765 isn't quite meeting the mark. So I have 2 requests for you on this one, both equally important, but I think could get there 2 different ways. The first, I would recommend, and our fleet group would recommend, that we must consider increasing our annual allocation to 1.5 million generally to support fleet recommendations. This replaces our fleet at 90% of what is recommended. So when it gets to end of life, my slide covered up, sorry. When we get to end of life and we need to replace these vehicles, 765 isn't meeting the mark. So what we're seeing is deferment of vehicles in the general fund, and it's putting these off longer and longer and longer. The other issue is when a fire engine needs to be replaced, it's much more expensive, as we heard from Chief Wilson yesterday. So if one engine is 700,000 or an aerial is 1.5 million, it takes 2 years of the entire allocation to replace a fire engine. Clearly, a lot of our other general fund vehicles are not being addressed because we'd have to take all of the funds and only give them to one division or one use. Doesn't work long term, and it's frankly not working. So we are recommending increasing to 1.5 million. That then gets our general fund fleet up to its 90% replacement recommendations, and we can generally keep up. It'd be like keeping up with inflation on the fleet side. The second item would really help out if we had the opportunity as a one-time allocation to address some of those larger ticket items. If we could catch up, it would help us on that annual allocation. Fire recognized and gave to you yesterday a presentation about their apparatus needs. We concur. Fleet Group concurs that their request is about 2.2 million. And if they had a one-time shot, regardless of revenue source, it would ease the burden on the 765. The top 3 are also listed. Fire, 2.2 million. Parks has about a $200,000 need for kind of that one-time boost to get them caught up to where we could feel more better about that. And then police has about a $500,000 need to get caught up. Those 3 are the big ones. And I would advocate that one-time allocations would help us kind of get caught up, but then we need to look at an ongoing source of 1.5 to keep the fleet up all 700 pieces. I believe that is my last slide. I'm happy to take any questions on fleet.
Awesome. Great job, Scott. Councilmember Shimoni is in the queue.
Thank you, Nicole and Scott. Hi, thank you for your presentation. I'm wondering on this slide, how does the possible safety bond that we might be putting out to the public going to impact your request here for fleets, since some of those bigger ticket fire apparatuses are in that?
So this might be more appropriate for some of our finance folks, or Rick or Heidi or whoever would like to take that question, but I think fleet general fund, we concur with Fire's recommendation. I think the revenue source is the council conversation that you started yesterday.
City Manager, I see you joined the conversation.
We've had a couple of fleet items discussed with the bond committee as presented by Fire, and I think the discussions were very good. And specific were the ongoing discussion of the need for a new quint, and that was a good presentation. Also, some pumper upgrades, potentially a new bay facility to accommodate fleet, and then there were some other odds and ends within Fire. But I think Scott has touched on something much greater. Now, to your question, there's a possibility that one or two things may fall off the list that Scott presented if the bond committee agrees that they should be going forward. That discussion, we haven't had those strategies yet, but a couple of pieces of fire equipment, and notably the quint, which is the big one, that's the big ticket item, are in front of the bond committee. I don't know if Chief Gaylord or Deputy Chief Wilson or others may want to elaborate on that, but that's my takeaway. Thanks.
And before we dive into that whole conversation, I understand that bond committee is still discussing this and all, but I guess my point with bringing this up, City Manager and Scott, it's just that if we do move forward with a bond initiative, I wonder if the ask from the general fund would lessen. I guess is my ultimate goal or question here, not goal. But I guess time will tell. But I just want to keep that in the back of our minds as we're having this conversation, Scott. But City Manager, jump in.
Well, a statement more on the philosophical level. One of the reasons we've been struggling with the quint and a few other large pieces is because we haven't had adequate funding elsewhere to cover these costs. And so now it's finding its way potentially to a bond question. I think what Scott is presenting to you is a higher level discussion that really should occur, which is, shouldn't we have the allocations out of the general fund necessary to deal with this over time, so that we're not having to go to our voters to ask for special requests to fund what arguably should be, anyway, an ongoing obligation of the city government, which is to update its fleet, very similar to the discussion about updating our facilities, the preceding discussion. So I think it's a bit of a philosophical discussion. That said, it's in front of the bond committee, but I do want to caution, I don't think, in my opinion, that's the best approach here. I think the better approach is to look at a year-to-year allocation that's going to meet the needs of the organization, which is serving the community. My 2 cents. Thanks.
Resiliency. I can get behind that. Thank you. That's all, Nicole. Appreciate it. Thank you, Scott.
Heidi, I have you in the queue for a comment, and then Councilmember McCarthy.
Yeah, thank you. I guess I'll just add to a little of what Greg just said, responding to the question about the funding, because he's absolutely correct. Yes, we are bringing forward at this time maybe a bond initiative to replace some equipment, but the ongoing issue is that we don't have enough money in the future then to replace those same pieces of equipment at the end of their life. So I think there's two discussions. It's our immediate needs to replace some of the equipment, as well as how do we continue on a replacement cycle going forward. So that was just a little comment I wanted to add. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember McCarthy?
Philosophically, I believe that when we're doing some new project like building a courthouse, that should be done with bonds. But philosophically, I don't think that ongoing things like needing a new police car should be put under bonds. Those should come out of the general fund on an ongoing basis. Thank you.
Scott.
And I will say thank you for your comments and your feedback, but that is the basis and why the recommendation to increase the annual allocation is on the screen. Doubling that fund gets us closer to our goal of 90% on recommended hours, miles, and use. So that speaks to both Greg and Heidi's comments that we're really trying to think about that 20 years out, and we believe that gets us closer to meeting our milestones and avoiding a future bond discussion in 20 years.
All right. Looks like we might be ready to move on to IT. And yes, echoing Rebecca's appreciation. All right, over to IT. CJ, is that you?
Yep, that's me. Hopefully I'll be pretty quick here. Yeah, Mayor and Council, good morning. CJ Perry, Director of IT. Just going to talk to you a little bit about some of the IT infrastructure that we have going on. As you all know, we have about $2 million in funding across multiple programs. 1.5 million of that came from some of the ARPA funding. And we're really excited about some fiber projects to move forward on this. One of the biggest things that we've been dealing with, and you heard it from Capital and from others, is that construction costs have gone up. We have some of our quotes that we've gotten have almost doubled when we actually started to look at starting some of these projects. So we're really starting to reevaluate exactly which projects we can afford to fund right now with the current funding we have. But more importantly, we've actually been looking at utilizing this funding more kind of on a match basis. We've been working with, I've had conversations with at least 5 or more fiber providers that have showed significant interest in Flagstaff. There's the ACA grant that has up to $10 million per project. And we've been talking with fiber providers that have been looking at that grant and partnering with them and doing matching funds as well to really sort of maximize where we can take our funds. So we're doing a little bit of a pivot, and we're kind of reevaluating what we can do, but I think there's a lot of great opportunities coming up here in the future with public-private partnerships and grants going forward. I also wanted to reiterate just some of our internal city fiber priorities, just for our own city facility needs and infrastructure needs. Our City Hall to Butler project is our highest priority. It also kind of connects in with NAU and the fiber we already have on Butler. All of our other projects sort of rely on this project, so it is really priority number 1. But beyond that, we have several high priorities that we always look at when we look at fiber infrastructure projects. Water infrastructure is one of the biggest ones. We need to connect water infrastructure for some of the automation and monitoring that they need, as well as cybersecurity. Our police station is a high priority for us to get connected to our fiber network. And then, of course, economic development, and that takes on a lot of different aspects. The business accelerator and incubator up at NASET is a high priority. Connecting our airport and like the business park and some of that land we're looking to develop around the airport is another high priority. But also another really big one that's been coming up recently that we're seeing a lot of movement on that I'm very excited about is some of the long haul fiber connections. So if we go to the next slide, I'll start to go through what some of those look like. This is a map provided by ADOT. This is some construction that they have going on right now. I will also put a link to kind of a press release that they have with a nice video regarding this project, showing a little bit about what they're doing. But they're bringing fiber from Flagstaff all the way down to Phoenix. And this is the part of that project that they're currently digging up as we speak. On the next slide, you'll see APS is also working on fiber. This map's a little harder to kind of see, but if you look in the bottom left, that's kind of the North Phoenix area. They've built fiber all the way up to the top right. That's Holbrook, right near Holbrook up there. Then they kind of come across I-40 through Winslow. And then at the very top, you'll see Flagstaff. That's where Flagstaff is at. And they just completed construction, that kind of orange shaded part down towards Prescott and Prescott Valley. And their final plan is to loop that all the way back down to North Phoenix to kind of create one big loop. So that's all been constructed here within a very, very short period of time within this last year, really, and got a lot more projects upcoming. On the next slide, we've got a private company that's really interested in some long-haul fiber routes. These ones are extremely exciting. Right now, we've had a lot of discussion on the red lines on this particular slide. They're looking to bring fiber from Salt Lake City and Denver down to Phoenix, which comes through the Navajo Reservation and right through Flagstaff. We actually had a staff member doing some site walks with them on some of the areas they want to bring in through Flagstaff. So really excited about this one. If this gets built, this is going to be provide a lot for the city of Flagstaff. And then kind of on their 3 to 5 year plan is what they tell me. They're looking at Los Angeles to Dallas. I know ADOT's also interested in kind of the east-west route along I-40. So anyways, it looks like there's a lot of fiber coming to Flagstaff, and we're kind of trying to position ourselves as, okay, how can we glue all of these different projects together so that we can provide this fiber to the ISPs in our community, to businesses in our community, and even utilize it ourselves as much as possible. So really excited about that. On the next slide, as far as kind of like what the next steps are, what we recommend kind of going forward, really our projects, we've got like $20 to $30 million worth of projects. We obviously don't have that in funds right now. We are actively looking at grants and stuff, but really I think that the best path forward is really to dedicate resources to a lot of these other capital infrastructure projects that we've been talking about. Whenever we're digging up a road or we're putting in a new water line or things like that, it's an opportunity. It doesn't always align with our broadband master plan, but it's an opportunity to evaluate those projects for additional conduit and additional fiber. Now, I will say, we've seen a lot of inflation. We've seen construction costs go up. You heard from Rick Barrett earlier on how even some of the funding that they have isn't going to meet all of the needs for some of the projects. And I do want council to be aware that conduit and fiber is another inflationary aspect of a capital project. It does add costs to those capital projects. So really helping us as staff understand from council if this is a high priority for you, so that we can identify accurate funding for some of these capital projects if we're going to add conduit and fiber upfront is very helpful for staff. Another thing is, just a reminder to continue to be funding a little bit of fiber funding to just add scope to some of these capital projects, but even having funding set aside for public-private partnerships or grant match opportunities. We're trying to take this $2 million and really maximize it into some $10 or $11 million projects using grants and public-private partnerships going forward, and having a little bit of funds in-house available for that is always helpful. And finally, just patience. These things take time. Again, we have $20 to $30 million worth of projects that we would like to do. Those things don't get built overnight, but there's a lot of movement and a lot of excitement. And I know we'd all love to have this built out today, but it's going to take some time. But as we see more of this money come out, I think we'll see a lot of progress over the next 5 to 10 years. On my final slide, I also wanted to bring up something that's unrelated to broadband and fiber, and just recognize that IT infrastructure is infrastructure. Sometimes we don't think, we always think of water pipes as infrastructure. We think of roads as infrastructure, things like that. But these days, servers, networking, even PC replacements, cybersecurity, software licensing, all of these are part of infrastructure. When these things go down, a lot of times the infrastructure that we have, the other infrastructure we have, suffers because of it as well. So I just want to, help council recognize that IT infrastructure is infrastructure. And to that, Greg made a point yesterday about how, we have been using a lot of one-time funds to really fund some of our ongoing needs. And some of this is just replacement of this infrastructure. And unlike, some bigger infrastructure where we can defer some of the maintenance costs for years and years and years, you can't defer servers and technology that long. You think of how often you replace your phones. Some phones just stop working after a couple of years. We have to keep up on a lot of this stuff, and we have about a $1 million gap as far as recurring funds to just cover basic things like software licensing for things we already have contracts for and whatnot. This is just basic keep the lights on sort of stuff. So really want to encourage council as far as dedicated ongoing resources towards just replacing our basic infrastructure. In addition to, obviously, we want improve technology going forward. We're talking about a smart city master plan on how we can align technology across the entire city and really incorporate it into all of our different areas and provide some of, you've seen the smart city app that I presented to council a little over a year ago, to really set ourselves up for that going forward. But in order to do that, we first have to just, manage what we have. Like I said, keep the lights on and all of that going forward. So with that, that was a short presentation. Hopefully I made up some time, and if there's any questions, I'd be happy to take those.
All right, Mayor.
I think people would expect me to chime in on this one. Thank you, CJ, for all your work on this, all the planning, all the research into what's going on at the national and regional level. I just want to point out that Flagstaff is really the hotspot for Arizona for expansion of our broadband network, and that in particular, the grant matching that we are seeing from the federal government, a lot of it is centered on equity. That's why there's these grant opportunities to expand our broadband network into neighborhoods like Sunnyside, neighborhoods like Pine Knoll, Southside, because it has been shown at all levels of government how this is a great equalizer for economic disparities, racial disparities. It is huge when somebody in Sunnyside now can be at home with the kids, but now be able to have a part-time job doing medical records online, or educational opportunities to get their associate's degrees and peck away during this. And that the fact is that most people on this phone, even though I know we have a lot of us face a lack of reliability on internet, the fact is that a lot of our neighborhoods like Sunnyside don't even have anywhere near the reliability that we have in this process. So I can't stress enough how much this is an equity issue, and that the matching dollars are specifically designated for that purpose from the federal government. And I see CJ nodding his head, so I have confirmation. The other part about cybersecurity is that cities are now being held for ransomware, with so many things to be having to spend and dole out millions of dollars if we do not preemptively get our network improved. I mean, I do believe, CJ, correct me if I'm wrong, but even Kingman had their entire server taken down with ransomware and were ransomed for like $1.3 million, something to that effect. Atlanta, Georgia was. Cities across the country. And as you know, Council, that we have had multiple issues with, for example, our server going down right before a council meeting and the inability to access agendas. That there are times when our emails do not work, and it has to be really done to improve that. So I just want to really stress the fact that this is now in the 21st century basic infrastructure. I do see City Attorney jumping on here, and whenever I do, I need to pass the torch.
I was almost going to jump in, but Sterling is probably going to say the same thing I was going to. Go ahead, Sterling.
Actually, I'm sorry. I didn't know my camera had gone on. I was trying to raise my hand.
Woo, I'm off the hook.
Well, if I could just.
I didn't accidentally mute, but yeah, go ahead, CJ. I think you're probably going to be better to say it than I am. Thanks.
Yeah, the only thing I wanted to say is when we talk about cybersecurity and we talk about some of those things, I'm more than happy to have those discussions, but that's a more appropriate place to have an executive session with the sensitive nature of it. Not that anything has been said so far that crosses that line, but if we ever want to go into details on that, I'm more than happy to have an executive session with council to discuss that.
Well said, CJ. And if I could, Mayor, just real quick, I'll put a tail on that. There is now a statute that actually, there was a revision to the statute for executive sessions that allows those to occur for security issues such as this. So
Really appreciate that. And again, sorry about the camera gaff. Is that the same as talking while on mute? Do I get a ding against me for that?
No, but it was impressive how quickly everyone responded. So it was
City attorney is getting involved. Well, and I don't need to get into. I shouldn't necessarily get into details. My point is that this is basic infrastructure, and there are cases across the country where cities are paying the just having to face this because they were not preemptive enough to secure it. So that's what I got to say with that. And just want to lastly mention that there is $68 billion worth of broadband coming into this into the nation, particularly for rural areas, particularly for Arizona, because we are more rural. We need to prepare for being able to have matching funds for this, just like we have matching funds for working to get matching funds for stormwater, for wastewater. We have to maximize this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that has been provided by the federal government and the infrastructure law. So there's my plug. So
okay.
Thank you for the airwaves there.
All right, Councilmember Shimoni.
I turned my camera on a minute ago just to see if I had the same reaction like Sterling does, or same, yeah. Anyways, point being, I don't, and I get that, Sterling. But Mayor, I appreciate that, your comments, and CJ, thank you for the presentation and your work on this. This is very exciting. I agree. Looks like Flagstaff is really going to be a central hub in all of this, and that's really exciting. CJ, so going back to a couple slides ago, you talked about Butler being the main number one, and maybe go back to that last slide with the dollar amounts. I'm just curious. I heard you say that how much does council want to prioritize this? I guess my question is I don't know. I think that we want to prioritize it, and I don't want to speak on behalf of council, but I think what I've heard from council in the past is that we do prioritize this, and have in the past. I also hear that, you're asking us to stay patient and let things kind of unravel a little bit in the next 3 to 5 years. But I guess I'm wondering, is this our top priority? I know Mayor would probably argue that it is, but maybe he wouldn't. But one of our top priorities, I would agree this is a priority. I guess I don't know what kind of direction to give. In regards to that top priority that you mentioned, CJ, regarding Butler, are we funded for that? Do we feel, I know that we're probably waiting on potential grant opportunities to leverage, but where are we at with that specific top priority?
So yeah, I'll speak to that real quick. We got a quote for that I think it was in August or forgive me about the exact timing, but it was a little while ago, getting ready to start that project, and the quote came back at around $350,000, and then when we were ready to actually start the project, that was just kind of an estimated quote. It came back closer to $550,000, so it went up quite a bit. We have $2 million, so we could cover that portion regardless. But I will say I've kind of put some of this stuff on hold because of those grant opportunities that came up, and there are several providers that are interested in building in this area and building along that route where we could partner with them and split costs and use grant funds and all of that stuff. I can't speak too much as this is live of which partners that I've been talking to. There's a lot of fiber, and we have to go through our procurement rules to find the right partner for all of that. But there's a lot of interest and a lot of growth there. But even if all of that doesn't happen, we can get that portion done. When it comes to beyond that, how far does the $2 million take us after that point? That's where it's starting to get a little bit smaller.
That almost seems like that might bring us to next year's budget discussions, is like, what do we need moving past the $2 million? Right now we're kind of, making guesses as to how much we're going to need for grant opportunities. But yeah, I think your patience point at one of your slides, I think really resonated with me. And I think we're in a good place, Mayor and Council, with the $2 million that we've allocated. So, anyways, I'll leave it there, and thank you.
Yeah, and if I could add one more just thing of note, just to one of the things you said, Councilmember Shimoni. That's why I'm really suggesting let's just kind of partner from a capital project perspective. That seems like the best middle ground where there's an incremental cost increase. We still get a lot of you saw a lot of the capital projects that we're working on. If we put conduit in a large portion of those, and maybe not all of them, again, we want it to align with the broadband master plan,
Right.
but that's where we kind of get the most bang for our buck from that perspective. But again, I want to be realistic that some of those projects we're already dealing with inflationary issues, and adding conduit just adds more. So understanding what council's thoughts and directions are from that perspective, I think would be very helpful for staff.
So just in closing, I'll say on that point, I would definitely support us, working in the funding needed to put that conduit in part of our projects that are already in place. I believe we've talked about this in the past, and that funding amount is not much per foot when it comes to project that's already underway. Is there a specific amount? Is it the 650? Is that the gap you're talking about right now?
No, the gap is more just our general IT infrastructure, servers, networks, PC replacements, cybersecurity funding, things like that. That's where this is. I would say when we talk, I don't have a specific number because it is kind of a lot of this is up in the air, but I'm kind of aiming somewhere in the $500,000 to $2 million mark. I think is kind of that sweet spot where we have enough funding to really get in on a good grant opportunity, a good public-private partnership. Again, that's a wide spectrum there, but that's sort of what I've been eyeing as far as a numbers perspective needed kind of ongoing just to kind of keep the project going forward.
Thank you.
All right. Councilmember Aslan, and then Councilmember Salas.
The first rule of Kermit the Frog Club is we don't talk about Frog Club. CJ, so I have a couple questions for you, and I don't want anybody to think I'm presupposing the answer here. I'm genuinely curious, and in terms of due diligence, I think it's a responsible question to ask for our constituents. What are the chances that things like SpaceX and Starlink and these other satellite technologies are going to make fiber optics and broadband moot or obsolete in the near future to the extent that maybe these aren't the greatest investments?
So I would say that,
and I invite you to speak as broadly about that as you want to.
Absolutely. So when you look at what the federal requirements are currently for a lot of these grants, as far as what speeds are they require in order to get some of these federal grants, SpaceX just barely meets some of them. It kind of depends on the grant. Each grant's written a little bit differently, but you're right on the edge there where when we look at kind of forward thinking, will these numbers, the minimum numbers for broadband go up in 5 years, and will SpaceX keep up? I have definitely question marks on that. Where I think SpaceX makes a lot of sense is when you're talking really rural, when you're talking there's places out on the Navajo reservation where you're talking really out there. And to build a fiber line out to that house, the cost is so great that it just doesn't make any sense. SpaceX really matches that really well. And the county actually, I know, has been working more with SpaceX on trying to get that. And I believe FUS, don't quote me on that. I know county and FUSD have had conversations on that as well on if we have students that need to do remote learning and stuff, SpaceX is a great option for some of those students that live pretty far out. When you're talking about within the Flagstaff city limits, the situation really flips more towards fiber. Makes a lot more sense. You get a lot more dedicated bandwidth for it. And then when you're also talking about economic development, when you're talking about businesses, SpaceX just doesn't come close to some of the high-tech needs of businesses. It's really an order of magnitude of where SpaceX gives you about you can get about 100-ish megs. I've seen more, I've seen less, and I'm sure that will advance. But when you're talking about fiber, you're talking about bundles of fiber at 100 gigs a piece. That's, if I did my math, you're talking hundreds and hundreds of thousands of megabytes versus 100 megabytes. So there's a place for it.
Of redundancy and security with the actual in the hand infrastructure as well. So
Absolutely.
yeah, thank you. I mean, I'm just trying to be responsible fiduciary agent here and thinking about, you know, and you must think about this all the time. Things become obsolete or advance so quickly in your industry that this is probably a top of the line consideration that you're always making. But thank you for letting me bring it up publicly.
Councilmember.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I understand that we have current policy of digging once, meaning when we're doing capital improvements, digging for new road and infrastructure, whether new build or expansion or modernization, we are also installing fiber. So how has that process been implemented, and what's the future looks like in terms of funding needs? Because you had mentioned that we want to interface fiber into all, if possible, of all of our capital improvement projects as well.
Thank you, Councilmember. I think Rick Barrett would probably be a better person to answer that question. I'm not sure. Rick, are you available?
I certainly am. I mean, simply put, council member, we are working with CJ and his team to determine, you know, if per the fiber optic master plan that a given project makes sense. You know, one of the things that I've talked to CJ extensively about is over the years, we've put a lot of conduit in the ground. We know where it's at. You know, we want to make sure it gets used, which I think is to Councilmember Aslan's point, or sorta to at Councilmember Aslan's point. For instance, we're working on the Lone Tree Overpass, has some conduit on it. It's quite a large number, just throw it out there. I've been informed by our project manager team. I mean, we've got $1 million worth of conduit and pull boxes that are included in the Lone Tree project. So, you know, this, you know, it's just be aware. I mean, this stuff is expensive. We're managing this from all ends possible. Hopefully I answered the question, and maybe I went too far.
Councilmember Salas, did that get what you were looking for?
Yes, it talks about, you know, current projects, but it just affirms that we still affirm that big one's policy, and always mindfully bring in fiber conduit to our projects if possible, mindful of the cost as well.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification. So then just another thought I can add that, yeah, you know, whether they're streets projects, whether they're water line projects, whether they're foots projects, we're looking at them all. You know, and that's the value of our programming, if I can get a chance to plug back into that point. You know, our programming helps us inform all these processes that are going on to run a city. You know, we have mapping exercises. You know, we realize that a project is going to happen in a certain part of town. So in order to minimize impact to neighborhood and business, we then try to consolidate efforts so that you don't have multiple projects year after year. Again, you consolidate those projects into one effort, again, to minimize impact to business and community. So yeah, the programming and planning effort all ties this together. That's the value of everything we do in the mapping exercises. Thank you for that add. Appreciate it.
Mayor DC?
Thank you. I just wanted to add that, and I appreciate you bringing that up, Councilmember Salas, that we still, amidst being able to add this into capital improvement projects, need to be able to have those dollars aside. For example, with cybersecurity grants that are out there right now, you can get them for cybersecurity, but you can't be putting conduit down for economic development purposes. It would be pennies on the dollar for doing that as we dig once, and that's an important policy for us to have. We still have to have a separate account for broadband to be able to actually put that conduit in the ground. It's not part of being able to get stormwater infrastructure grants from the federal government. What we can do is if we set aside broadband dollars, is that we can get those grants for stormwater, but also as, for example, while we're doing the Killip Elementary and working on 6th Avenue to get the water lines done, putting in conduit right there, well, that's not going to be covered by stormwater. That's going to be covered by broadband. So it's important to have this only dig once policy, and I see CJ and he can explain it 10 times better than I can, but yeah, just wanted to throw that out there. Okay, quarters on the dollar. 25
well, and I do want to
pennies on the dollar.
I do want to add some clarification. There are times where, Water Services brings funding to the table for the broadband infrastructure because it does connect their water infrastructure. So I think it's a both type of thing. We need a little bit of funding that's just dedicated to broadband. And that's kind of where I went with that, 500,000, 2 million is kind of that sweet spot of it gives us enough to partner when like a grant or something like that for a specific infrastructure project doesn't have conduit or fiber put into that project, but we can add to it, or we can partner with public-private partnerships, things like that. But then, we do look at this from an internal perspective on projects where it still makes sense. We have water infrastructure everywhere. So everywhere there's water infrastructure also needs to be connected. And we use a variety of tools to connect that, but fiber is one of the best tools to have. So, I'm constantly having conversations with capital and engineering, water services, and many of our other groups as far as, okay, does this project make sense? Is there common goals there? Where does the funding come from and all of that stuff? So it comes from a lot of different areas in order to meet these goals.
All right. Greg, anything that you have remaining questions on, need input on before we kind of move into this next section on council forum budget expectations?
No, it's been a good discussion. Some of this a little bit more with more uncertain outcomes than others, but we are getting some clarity on some things. So I think on my end, I'm good. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Well, seeing no other questions from council, we are moving into the council forum and budget expectations for the April retreat. And I've got Greg and the mayor slated next to this one.
Well, I'll turn it over to Clifton to make sure that we're framing it in a way that's going to be productive for staff to move forward.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple of thoughts, mostly stemming from today's conversations. I do think we at the staff level need to debrief from all the talking points and the comments that have been shared, and compile and refine and go through a rather arduous process of making sense of some of these things. And I do sense maybe a work session in the future specific to the capital improvement discussion. But as I mentioned earlier, it's a bigger discussion than that. We have to look at these things in totality, but from a budgetary standpoint. The leadership team is meeting today and debriefing, and I am going to invite that discussion to occur while these thoughts are fresh in people's minds. And we will start getting our thoughts on paper, and we'll start that process. I do think this has been a valuable retreat in terms of soliciting some direction and perspective, but I think a lot of work lies ahead. Those are my thoughts, Mayor.
Thank you, City Manager. Just curious, well, more that, again, with the framing, April is going to be more of a time for programmatic suggestions rather than now for, hey, let's do this program that's going to cost maybe $60,000 or $80,000, rather than let's bring up all these ideas and thoughts that we have up right now in kind of more brainstorming mode that may not be as productive.
Okay, Councilmember Shimoda. Oh, continue.
I think I'm seeing a yep from Clifton.
Yes, concurrence.
Okay,
yes.
Just making sure, because we have gone in a little more trees rather than the forest in this discussion, which is very good, and I'm really glad about the conversations. But with the timeline, just want to be conscientious. So, yeah, Councilmember Shimoni.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, City Manager, for that reflection as to what is next steps for the budget team or the leadership team. I mean, I appreciate your comments, City Manager, and I appreciate the leadership team really debriefing what we talked about today, especially. And I guess just going to the point that Nicole brought up about expectations or looking ahead to April, I just ask leadership team and budget team that we really take a hard look at our two emergencies again, our housing emergency that we've declared and our climate emergency, and look through those lenses in some of this. I know not everything falls within those two lenses, but for things like capital improvement, 5-year plans, and housing requests, I think those need to be really evaluated through the lens of these two emergencies that Council's declared in years past. And I look forward to those conversations in April, and I look forward to that work session that you mentioned, City Manager. I think that'd be very helpful. And it sounds like we got work to do. We got a lot of work to do. But Mayor, Nicole, good week. Good, it feels like a week. Good last 2 days. Thank you all for the good conversations over the last 2 days. Team Flag, so proud to be a part of this effort with all of you. And Nicole, I really liked your focus on looking for the wins. That really struck with me a good chord internally. And although we're going through hard times, as we always are, I do think that we find lots of wins, and it's important to celebrate and recognize that we're in this together and we're doing good work. The community appreciates that, and we will continue to stride forward. I appreciate all of you. I also want to give a quick shout out to Deputy City Manager Shane Dill, who I believe is transitioning away from Team Flag. And Shane, we so appreciate you, and I'm so excited for you and your next endeavors. And I'm grateful for your service to our team and our community. Thank you, Shane. And I'll leave it at that, Mayor. I know it's been a long couple days and I've talked a lot, and I apologize. And I just want to say thank you all for letting me speak and letting me be me, and while trying to also prevent this from happening. So have a great weekend, everybody, and I really look forward to the hard work ahead of us.
All right. Vice Mayor, I see you're ready for a comment.
Yes, thank you. I actually have several comments, so I would like to take Councilmember Shimoni's extra time plus the time that I don't usually spend talking. Thank you.
Go for it.
All right, I am going to be relatively quick. First, I want to thank staff. I know that putting together these 2 days is a huge undertaking that you work on all year round, and I appreciate that your asks are conservative. We're talking about huge numbers, but I know that your asks are conservative, and I know that they're thoughtful, and I know that they're all absolutely necessary. I have that much faith in our staff that you work this until you feel like you are bringing forth like the bare bones of what we need. So I appreciate that. And I absolutely support all of our foundational needs, safety, efficiency, prudent investments. Absolutely, I do. I want to make sure that I make that clear. I ask council and city staff that to remember that our community needs extend beyond just these foundational needs, and that extension grows every year. We're seeing bigger impacts from our lack of affordable housing and from climate change. And I echo what Councilmember Shimoni said about remembering which emergencies we've declared. And I just ask us to remember, as we're thinking about these foundational and very critical needs, that housing is important for our city's health, economic health, social health, and our stated equity goals. Lack of affordable housing holds us back from what we could be achieving in terms of business retention and attraction. Lack of affordable housing holds us back from an equity standpoint as a community, and lack of affordable housing holds us back from thriving as we are capable of doing. Our climate change mitigation and adaptation needs aren't environmental wishes. Those of us least able to afford the impacts of climate change will most experience those impacts, and in fact already are experiencing those impacts. And some of the impacts are decreased air quality from catastrophic wildfire, flooding resulting from these fires, increased temperatures, and the duration of our hotter months. We all know that it's getting hotter and hotter. We feel it in our homes, out in the community. And so I just wanted to put that out there, and I guess so that you understand where I'm coming from and where my thinking is. And I think finally, I've said this before, and I'm going to continue saying it, is that I firmly believe that housing needs a seat at the leadership table and in all planning efforts for the city. I want to make sure that housing is always there and always included in the discussions. And I guess lastly, Nicole, thank you for dealing with all of our personalities and for keeping us on track and moving forward. You're always delightful to work with, and I really appreciate you facilitating us. And again, thank you, staff. Such gratitude to you for all the work that you put into these great 2 days. I'm excited, and hopefully everyone else is as well. So have a great weekend.
Great. Councilmember Sweet, did you want to join in?
I just wanted to do a quick thank you to everybody. This was such a great couple of days, and the one thing that I'm really seeing is that I feel as council is being heard. Staff, you are listening, and I just really appreciate that. I think that is something that is so crucial, but I think often gets missed. So thank you. Thank you for all of your hard work. Thank you, team. And I'm just so proud to be part of Team Flagstaff. Thank you.
Wonderful. All right, Mayor.
Thank you, Nicole. And I know, so much work goes into this that we don't, as electeds, don't even realize. And just want to echo many of my peers that really appreciate how much thoughtfulness, how much goes into just creating a simple table of dollar amounts is so much work. The base things I want to discuss with or mention, particularly around bonding, is that as we move forward, we really need to know and I'm not saying I want this, but we need minimums, not just priorities, but priority packages, because we're going into budget session we're going into bonding capacities that, yeah, we have 100 million. I'll just say I don't want to be putting on the ballot really more than 60 if we can help it. And with all of what we've seen the last 2 days, I mean, $50 million asks here, $70 million asks there, all of which are extremely important, well thought out. We need not just a priority list of ABC, we need the priority packages. And also those minimums, I know I mentioned with housing today of seeing what 10 million would look like, but in all realms, because there's going to be a hard balancing act, as we know, for council. It's going to be a hard balancing act for our community when we go to voters. And also we need to consider the fact that I know that council members and myself don't want to see anything going on the ballot that can't actually pass. So, and also that we need to maximize matching funds. And I think we've heard resoundingly from council that anywhere we can have revolving funds or cost recovery with first-time funds is also should be impacting our priority list. So there's the need, there's also the perpetuity of being able to fulfill needs that need to be balanced. Aside from that, I mean, we also, I'll just say this too, that we also need to keep in mind not just about matching dollars with feds and the state, but also the matching dollars between private and public partnerships that are going to be very important for our future. So those are my 30,000 foot comments, and I'm looking forward to additional work sessions on some of these more specific items like capital improvement, as well as our April retreat where we can really dig in deeper and provide programmatic suggestions moving forward. So with that, thank you everyone for all your work.
All right, Greg, just a couple of closing comments from me after sitting with you the last couple of days. One, to recognize the depth and breadth of what you do. We started the morning talking about finding one person housing, and we're wrapping up talking about tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars in possible bond projects. So not taking for granted the scope that you do. Also giving a little voice to the frustration that sometimes happens along the way, that is a natural part of the process. And the thing that I see as one of your superpowers, Team Flagstaff, is never letting that get in the way of continuing to do good work together. And that constant repositioning into what's highest value, most strategic. How do we integrate this as much as possible? How do we maintain that collaborative approach, and then balancing that with all of those competing demands? So just affirming and recognizing that moving forward. And as always, I enjoy spending this time. I always appreciate the chat, and your use of the GIF function in particular is highly admirable. All right, Greg, over to you. All right, Greg, we got you back. Oh, and Councilmember Salas, I see you just raised your hand. It looks like Greg's having some trouble. Councilmember Salas, you want to hop in real quick?
Sure. My watch is telling me to start to get moving and walking. I just want to provide a space for gratitude. You know, for Team Flagstaff, just being mindful of our role of stewards of taxpayers' dollars. I mean, you embody and exemplify fiscal responsibility. You know, where we talk about balancing our multiple priorities, but also balancing spending and taxation, which will hopefully, and I know we will, come up with, we will create, optimize, and maintain a balanced budget. And with a great sense of adaptability, resiliency, and equity. So I just thank Team Flagstaff. Big grateful hearts. I also call out Mr. Shane Dilly, wishing him well. And I do remember 3 years ago, the previous council started talking about PBB, how it works. Just kind of like the vision for having PBB. Now we have a full year of PBB into our second year, so we will keep it going. And thank you, Mr. Mayor, for also articulating, it's about cost recovery, and I have that policy request, and I think we have a majority of council moving forward with a cost recovery policy, and always explore and maximize opportunity for public-private partnerships in terms of policy and program. And I appreciate the look into going into some programmatic decisions, but I always want to remind council that we have a city manager council form of government. Our main role is to appoint the city manager who is in charge of day-to-day management of operation and also coming up with 5-year programs. We adopt a budget. So I caution us getting into the minutia of identifying projects or how staff will manage projects and programs, because they are the experts in their own fields. Thank you. And you rock, Team Flagstaff. Thank you.
All right. It is time for lunch. It's time to get moving according to our watches. Greg, you want to wind us down here?
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Councilmember Salas, for those comments, and thanks for all the other comments. Leadership team will be convening here shortly. I have 11:54, and I'm wondering if we could get back at it here at 12:30 for a couple of hours to debrief this retreat and to talk about some other things. Does that work for you, Nicole? Great. So we will come back at 12:30, and Council, you're off the hook. Enjoy your weekend, and thank you for a very thoughtful day and a half of budget retreat. Much appreciated.
Oh, Greg, you've got Sterling wanting to jump in.
Very good.
Just briefly, I appreciate it, and Councilmember Shimoni raised it. I just thought I'd give a shout out to Shane, departing Deputy City Manager. Way back when PBB first started, Councilmember Salas, you mentioned we've been doing it for a while now. Shane was the one that brought it back to the city and said, let's try this. And I really appreciate everything you've done, Shane. I say that because, man, PBB is a ton of work, but you know what? It's okay. And I appreciate the process. Best of luck to you, Shane.
Okay. That's enough appreciation for Shane. We love you. Oh, Councilmember McCarthy. Okay. And then turn it off.
I don't think that was enough appreciation for Shane. Shane is an Eagle Scout, which I am also, and it's sad that staff is losing an Eagle Scout. So good luck down south. Thank you, Shane.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.
This way.
All right. Thank you.
This is the Navy way. This is the Boy Scout way.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all. Nice job. Good luck, leadership.